in the discussions that internal audit, much as it is good and its role is actually beyond assurance providers, but it is not well understood. And one of the panelists mentioned that among all professions, like lawyers, doctors, engineers, and even teachers, their roles are well understood, but why is it that for internal auditors are not understood? So it is a question that was thrown that should be actually asked it, CIA to explain. Then another thing that also stood out of me is that do not miss a meeting, and that you need to share. So this is what stood out of me yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Yes, sir, please. And at the back as well.
Yeah, so yesterday the session, internal audit, has evolved from the traditional checking compliance level to actually managing the strategic risks of an organization. Basically, internal audit is now in the 21st century an enabler of organizational management, risk management, of course, controls as well. So as opposed to how it used to be, for example, when I started out my career in the Ministry of Finance many years ago, I was told here it is settlement audit, something like that, something I didn't see when I went to university. So that kind of thing, yeah. So it's more or less like value addition if the recommendations of the internal auditors are implemented, because that is actually where the bottom line is. You could have a bunch of issues, by the end of the day, are they risk-based? Are they, will they address the issues of the organization? And will they be fixed by the various control owners? And that's where I think we have the biggest challenge. And that was discussed yesterday. Hopefully, all auditees will take that forward so that the internal audit will be effective. Thank you.
Good, excellent. So if I would link the two comments, if more of us understood what internal audit is, then it becomes even easier for us to understand what the value of internal audit is. And as you've said, internal audit is evolving, so the more people understand what it is that internal auditors do, and then the more internal audit is able to demonstrate their value to the business. And then I think going forward, that can be an easier conversation between the internal audit function and the other functions within the national societies.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Bien, je ne sais pas si je vais tout simplement répondre à la question, mais pour ma part, par contre, je préfère répondre à la question, mais en même temps me dire que parce qu'à chaque conférence, je devrais retenir quelque chose de plus important pour la journée, quelque chose qui va aider ma société nationale. Dans la journée d'hier, ça a été consacré au renforcement de l'intégrité et plus concentré sur l'excellence de l'audit, comme vous l'avez dit, interne, et les dispositifs d'assurance. Ce qui était plus important pour moi, c'est que la complémentarité qui est entre l'audit interne et externe, dans la mesure où l'audit externe vient renforcer, appuyer sur certaines questions sensibles que l'auditeur interne a du mal à pouvoir poser à l'organisation. Et les discussions ont été également portées sur les défis de l'ère numérique, sur les questions de fraude et de l'IA, et sur l'importance des pratiques sûres et responsables dans le programme d'assistance en espèces. Mais les points clés qui m'ont été plus marqués, c'était l'assurance que ma société nationale devra gérer les transferts monétaires, non seulement efficacement, mais surtout avec une intégrité totale, tout en mettant en œuvre le mécanisme de prévention des risques de fraude, d'exploitation et abus sexuels, et assurer la conformité légale dans la gestion des données des bénéficiaires, et aussi à démontrer une capacité d'adaptation en temps réel face aux conséquences imprévu des transferts monétaires. C'était vraiment ça le point clé que moi j'aurais retenu pour la journée d'hier. Merci.
Thank you very much. Excellent recap there on the sessions that happened in the course of the day. And I'll move to the second session, and the second session that we covered on cybersecurity and IT risks and IT in relation to integrity. The facilitator gave us some fascinating statistics on the projects that we do implement, the successes of those particular projects. And there was 3 things that we were supposed to remember, 1, 2, 3A and 3B, and questions that we were supposed to ask ourselves. So, however, because I come from a background of internal audit, I'll audit your attendance yesterday. So I'll ask if there's anyone who will remember what those 3 questions were. You'll get a chocolate. Internal audit is giving gifts to those who are good students. So hands up for those who can take us through the 3 questions that were asked. Yeah, I see there's a hand here and there's a hand from Irene as well at the back. So let's start with Irene.
So it's the 3 questions, right?
Yes.
The 3 issues to take. The first one was do not miss a meeting. The second one was when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And the third one was you must share. So we had the A and B. The first was you must share, and the second was ask yourself, are you measuring? Are you automating? And are you driving action? Thank you.
Excellent. Any other person who wants to say it in different words, but make sure that you're covering the entire thing, so you can give an extra chocolate to...
Yes.
Yes, yes.
So
please
for me,
proceed.
the AI yesterday, what came out very clear was that you need safeguards. You cannot place reliance on AI if you don't have safeguards. So first things first, it's about what you want AI to do for you, and make sure the safeguards are in place to ensure you are getting what you have asked for, and that you can be able to provide. Otherwise, it could give you anything, and that came out very clear. The lady from Standard Chartered Bank, that they had the council they had set up to ensure they filter through what AI is giving them to ensure it's providing them what they require for the business. Yes, and also that it's not something you just do because you see other competitors doing it. If it's not providing your specific solutions to your problems, you have to ensure. So that means you need to know what you want for AI to give you what you want, basically. Otherwise, it could give you anything. Thank you.
Chocolate as well, and then we have Julianne there at the corner. Madam Julianne there also wants a chocolate.
Thank you. The other thing that stood out on that AI discussion was that yes, you do have to automate, but you do not have to use AI to solve problems, even though you have to solve the problems. And so I think the discussion on security in this age of AI was very important. And the fact that you have to be careful when you're exposing your critical data to these AI large language models, and how that can breach company data. So I think it was a very insightful outlook on AI and how it is used in the companies and in internal audit.
Excellent. So issues of zero trust whenever we are dealing with data, and how we should not expose data to these models. And the key question that was covered by the previous speaker on what problem are you trying to solve? So whenever you are implementing those AI solutions, you must start with that conversation of what problem are we trying to solve. There's a hand at the back, Amos there.
Thank you very much. So for me, what stood out is the statement, a problem automated is a problem on steroids. That means if you have not solved the problem, then automation will just magnify the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Amos. So Amos gets a chocolate as well for reminding us that a problem automated is a problem on steroids. Thank you very much. for your active participation, you are active students, and you participated well in yesterday's sessions. We can see clearly that you do remember the key points that stood out from yesterday's panel discussions. So our final day, we'll be looking at safeguarding. Discussion today is on safeguarding. We have a panel discussion, and our panelists will be joining us shortly. Then after the panel discussion, we'll break for tea. Then at around 10:45, we'll have a safeguarding pledge, or that national societies who are present here can confirm to us whether they have signed or agreed to that safeguarding pledge. And from 11:30, we have celebrations for the Kenya Red Cross, which is celebrating their 60 years anniversary. And then we'll close the workshop at midday. Thank you very much, and I hand over this to Aisha.
Thanks, Joseph, for that. So I think we are ready for the safeguarding session. Are we ready? Excited? Okay. So may I kindly ask the panelists to please join us on stage? Debbie, Edla, and Stella. And Joe is also joining us online.
Hello.
Joe, there's an accusation here from our SG on gender imbalance. So thank you very much. So I'll hand over to Joe for the quick introduction. Over to you, Joe, and the panelists. Welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much for this. And thank you to everybody for joining us. The point by the SG is very well made about the absence of gender balance here, but we come from everywhere on this panel. So I hope that, you know, we will get at least some points for diversity. I'm very privileged here to introduce Stella Smith-Akaney, who is the PSCA and Child Safeguarding Advisor at UNICEF Kenya Country Office. She's coordinator of the Interagency PSCA network in Kenya, and she brings with her over 20 years experience, including as regional PSCA coordinator for the Syria crisis. So next to her is Edla, who is the Global Safeguarding Advisor for Oxfam, who is a Kenyan lawyer and who has worked at Oxfam since 2014, has been deployed to multiple emergencies, including the Ukraine response, where she worked from Romania and Moldova. And lastly, but not least, my colleague, Debbie Busler, who is head of safeguarding at the British Red Cross, who's a social worker for over 20 years and who's worked with local government authorities in both the UK and the US, leading work advancing child protection with unaccompanied minors and care leavers. So we've got a great expert panel here, which is my privilege to introduce. And if we can move to the PowerPoint, that would be great. So I can walk us through an overview. That would be great. So today we're talking very much about beyond compliance. PSCA and sexual exploitation, sexual misconduct is a huge thing, I know, for all of us, both as a value and as an issue around compliance, but it's much more than that. And we need to make sure that we're operationalizing what we say we're doing and actually walking the talk. So if we could move over, please, to the next slide, that'd be great. So we're very aware that these discussions are very difficult. We recognise that 1 in 3 women and girls globally are affected by sexual violence, as indeed are 1 in 6 men and boys. So this discussion explores abuse and exploitation. It's a difficult one. If you feel the need to step out, please do. If you want to have a chat with anybody, again, for those of you who work with IFRC, you can speak to Staff Health. Otherwise, please do feel free to reach out to me or indeed to anybody on the panel. If you want to share during the course of conversations and questions later today, please do. But please make sure that there's no identifying information and do respect whoever is speaking, avoid interruptions. We're very aware, as I said, this stuff is tough. So if somebody wants to share, albeit in a non-identifying way, please respect that and let them speak. So next slide, please. I'm very sorry, there's a bit of noise at the background because my son's corgi is in the same room as me. Sorry, he thinks I've got up early to play with him. Anyway, we know that there are all sorts of different definitions. National societies in the room will have different perceptions of what safeguarding involves. But, you know, for all of it, we want to be very clear that, you know, it's fundamentally about keeping people safe. It's about the misuse of power. And we need to make sure that our staff, our volunteers, and all those that we serve are protected from harm. It also includes protecting our own people. So those we serve and those we work with are protected from harm. And it includes everything. IFRC has a very broad definition of safeguarding, but there's a particular focus, and I certainly as head of safeguarding, focus on sexual misconduct. And you will see within the safeguarding umbrella, there is a point there about unintentional harm. The big issue about this work is that intention doesn't matter. It's the impact that matters. It's the action that matters. So if we could move on to the next slide, please. So why does safeguarding matter? Above all, everybody in this room, we know we've signed up to the humanitarian duty to do no harm. We also recognise that in many contexts, there's a potential breach of local law, whether that's local law related to employment law or whether it's local law regarding sexual conduct. But above all, we know that the trust and access to communities, when any safeguarding issues are involved, is damaged. It's great that we've got Stella speaking actually here and Edla, because they will be able to tell you, you know, sort of outside of the movement, experiences outside of the movement. But I know that Edla will not mind my saying that Oxfam UK is still not allowed into Haiti after the sexual misconduct scandal in 2018. So this stuff has major repercussions, both individually and institutionally. Again, it's important for the safety and dignity of colleagues. You know, nobody's going to be productive. Nobody is going to do the best work that they can if they're being sexually harassed or if they're being exploited in any way. And obviously, again, above all, it's got to be about the, you know, the permanent harm potentially, and indeed intergenerational harm for any child born of sexual exploitation and abuse for those individuals. And finally, and unfortunately, you know, we have to be aware about donor requirements. And the reason for that is not because donors are more important, but because unfortunately, what frequently happens is that communities are unfortunately adversely impacted twice, both in terms of the individual, but then also by the withdrawal of services that have been caused as a consequence of the scandal. So, for example, when Save the Children was hit by multiple scandals in 2018, they were forced to close programs in key places such as Afghanistan, for example. They lost about a third of their programs, and I know Oxfam was similarly affected. So, you know, we have to be aware that, you know, first and foremost, it has to be about individual harm, but it's also about the extent to which we are stopped from doing the work that we are called to do as a consequence of the withdrawal of funding. And we have to be very aware. A lot of governments, a lot of our bilateral donors are literally not allowed by law to fund organisations that have issues around safeguarding. So it is something that we have to bear in mind. And obviously in a, you know, financially constrained environment, it's the real reason for donors to walk away. So next, please. So I often get asked, what's the difference between safeguarding and PGI for all of us in the movement? So what I would always say is safeguarding is about our internal accountability. It's about how we are preventing our own staff and activities from causing harm. It's about making sure that we are actually working collectively as an organisation, a whole of organisation approach to make sure that we're doing no harm. And obviously, for those of you who are in the room, who are safeguarding focal points, you will know that our work often involves case management. It's about actually managing those incidents, victim liaison and support. I am IFRC's victim liaison focal point, and I work very closely with legal, HR, OIAI, and the security teams to make sure that all those who have been affected when prevention efforts fail are cared for, are safe, and get the services that they need. My colleagues in PGI who do amazing work are working particularly on the external protective environment. They're addressing violence, discrimination, exclusion wherever national societies work. They're working particularly on supporting the external, the safe environment within which everybody is working, and a protective environment on the whole. It's a dedicated technical work stream and a thematic support function, whereas safeguarding is fundamentally for everybody. It's all of our job, and it's an institutional requirement. So I hope that that helps, and we'll be happy to answer questions on that later. Next slide, please. So just to remind again about what is it that we're talking about, and I really wanted to put this up there, not because I'm sure everybody in the room does know this, but to demonstrate that while we've got colleagues here from UNICEF, from Oxfam, from British Red Cross, and from others, we are all using the ISC definitions, the Interagency Standing Committee definitions. So we have a common approach to how we're defining sexual exploitation and abuse and sexual harassment. And we're very clear that all of this, the sexual exploitation and sexual abuse, can affect members of the community and affected populations, and it can also affect our staff as well. So, we're very clear that, it's actual or abuse, actual or threat of abuse, actual or threatened physical intrusion. And just to bear in mind that sexual harassment isn't usually sexual exploitation abuse, but it can be, where, for example, somebody's been offered the promise of a better job, they've been promised that they will keep their job, they've been promised access to better education or international surge or something like that, all of which cases have very sadly crossed my desk while I've been at IFRC over the last 3 years. So, next slide, please. So, fundamentally, what are we actually talking about? We're talking about 4 key pillars. So, we're talking about leadership and delegation culture, which I know Debbie will speak to shortly. We're talking about recognition and prevention. We're talking about reporting, and we're talking about response and support to victims and survivors. So Stella will speak to us later around policy and prevention. And Edla will talk about policy and prevention, and Stella will talk about response. But, all of these are fundamental, to the safeguarding framework. And we've got multiple standards of this. We've got safeguarding self-assessments for national societies, and indeed safeguarding self-assessments for delegations. So we're very clear about all of those pillars, and we're all working to the same standards. Thank you. Next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, how we operationalizing any of this is through a whole of organization approach. So we've got a real focus on prevention. We've got to look at safe programming. Are we actually checking risks? Are we using the tools that we've got to make sure that we recognize key risk points in programming, such as assessments, distributions, and making sure that we're including safeguarding in monitoring and evaluation? We're looking at safe partnerships. Who is it we're contracting with? Are we actually, establishing with them what our expectations are and standards around their and their staff's behavior? We're making sure that where we can, we respond as quickly as possible wherever prevention fails. The big point is, we acknowledge that prevention doesn't always work. We know that safeguarding incidents happen in all societies, at all levels, in all cultures and communities. The issue is, how quickly and safely do we respond? How do we make sure that we are preventing wherever possible? At IFRC, we're doing a lot of work on the additional training of managers and HR, and making sure that there's a cadre of focal points. And I know across the national societies, there's a very well-established cadre of focal points on this. And we're looking to support a significant cultural shift to normalise the duty of care around, you know, those we serve and those we work with. And I know Debbie is going to speak further to that. Next slide, please. So what does this look like in practice? You know, are we making sure that we're letting everybody know that we work with, you know, that aid is entirely free? Nobody should be asking them for anything. Are we making sure that all of our volunteers, all of our personnel and the communities we work with know the standards of behaviour that they have the right to expect from us? Are we checking with communities how and where they might want to make sensitive complaints, recognising that different age groups, you know, different types of people, older people, younger people, children, you know, men, women, girls, they require different mechanisms. You know, we know, for example, that men often prefer to talk to somebody privately. Women and girls want to have face-to-face conversation. We need to make sure gender balance teams. So again, the SD was dead right about gender balance at registration distribution sites. And we make sure that no single person ever has the sole power to determine allocations. We need to make sure everybody's safe. So next slide, please. And I know that there are a lot of issues. And again, we're very lucky in our panel that we've got today about people with experience in emergencies. How do we make sure that we can prepare for when prevention fails and emergencies happen? So we have to make sure we're safe from the start. You know, are we using the risk tools that we've got available, including the child safeguarding risk assessments and direct checklists? You know, do we know in advance as part of our emergency preparedness? Have we mapped available referral pathways? The last thing you want to do when you've got an incident is to start racing around trying to find out where and who to contact. You know, if you've got a victim survivor, you know, have you got PET kits available? Do people know how and where they are and how to use them? Do people know what kind of care, you know, what the oversight is? Have you got money to transport people to access medical facilities? You know, make sure that everybody knows how and where to report and what happens next, because we do find that a lot of people don't report because they're worried about what happens next and they worry about confidentiality. And we certainly have done a lot of work around that, actually, around confidentiality. So, and I would just urge everybody in the room, if you get reports, that's a good thing. It shows that your accountability mechanisms are working. No reports is not a good thing. So, you know, if you actually get them, we at IFRC are seeing an increase in the reporting, and we see that as a good thing. Yes, it means that obviously our prevention efforts aren't always working, but we learn from that. But it means that people feel safe to report and they think that they will get a response. And that's an indicator of trust. So, next slide, please. Okay. Is this the time then actually that I should just hand over now? Lovely picture of Millinois there. Hello, Millinois. Yeah. I just want to hand over to our panel now and to invite Debbie to speak about the importance of leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo. You stole a bit of my thunder there with some of it, but I'll repeat a little bit.
Sorry.
First, let me just thank the Kenyan Red Cross Society for hosting this wonderful conference, this important conference, and particularly for making safeguarding such a priority here. It's needed, and we appreciate you making this such a top priority on the agenda. As Jo said, I'll speak about the leadership endorsement being critical to embedding safeguarding across national societies. Can you hear me? Okay. So first of all, on day one, I mean, I think we've touched on many of these issues throughout the conference. Can you hear me? Is this better? Okay. On day one of this conference, we were talking about leadership and how leaders can inspire integrity. And we heard from the Secretary General of KRCS and the governor, as well as the regional director from Africa and the Secretary General of IFRC. And some of the things they said really resonate in terms of safeguarding. So living by example, committing to a safeguarding culture, and having a collective support for the prevention of sexual exploitation and abuse. And those are all really important in that building trust that we need to have in order to have a safeguarding culture. And safeguarding is a cultural issue. It's about how the whole organization works, and it should be a golden thread that's cutting across everything that we do in each of our national societies. So it should be a core value. And you'll hear a lot of safeguarding professionals talk about safeguarding being everybody's responsibility, and it is. But without having leadership support and that encouragement and the championing of safeguarding, it won't go as far as it could. So it needs to start from the top. We need that nurturing from leadership to really say that this is an important area of work. It sends a powerful message when leadership says that safeguarding is important. It's saying that the people that we support and our staff and volunteers should be free from abuse and harm, and it's not negotiable. And that does send a powerful message across the organization as to how to keep people safe. It should be a shared commitment. So it's not just one team, it's not just the leadership saying this, it's everybody working together in order to keep people safe. When leadership supports safeguarding, it shows that it's a strategic priority across the organization. So it becomes, rather than it being a tick box exercise or compliance, it can become embedded. It gets the visibility and perhaps the resources that it might need in order to be embedded across all the layers of an organization. It can also empower staff when they hear that their leaders are supporting safeguarding. It gives that psychological safety that people can make a report, and particularly if they know that there will not be retaliation for making those reports. It also drives consistencies, having leaders support safeguarding. It sets out clear expectations around best practice, and it creates a unifying approach to how we deal with safeguarding. Leaders can also model behaviors around safeguarding, and Jo touched on some of these in her talk, but showing the support, having the verbal and the written support in strategic documents, in staff meetings, all of that adds and contributes to making a conversation that stays alive. It can be on board agendas, it can be in key performance indicators. All of that gives it a strategic approach that shows that it's important. Also maintaining confidentiality. Sometimes the safeguarding issue can turn into a bit of a gossip. But when leaders keep things confidential, when people know that it's not going to be discussed, that again contributes to the sense of psychological safety so that people feel able to report when they need to. And when leaders deal with bad behaviors, no matter what level they're occurring at, that also gives people the confidence that people can be safe and can be comfortable and confident that if they have to report something, that they will be taken care of. So while a team or an individual might be the safeguarding lead, and they can make progress in an organization without having that backup from leadership, it won't progress as far as it could. It will stall, and it will just be a lone voice, but it needs to have that consistent voice, that encouraging voice, that nurturing voice from leadership that happens regularly, because it's not a one and done thing, it's an ongoing thing, and it has many stages of implementation. So I'm just going to briefly speak about the British Red Cross, our experience, and some of the things that have happened within our leadership team. A couple of years ago, we hired a couple of external consultants to assess where we were as an organization with safeguarding. And they gave us some feedback that perhaps our leadership could learn a little bit more about safeguarding and could be a bit more, I hope nobody's watching this from the BRC, but they suggested that we had a bit more engagement from higher levels. And so what that resulted in was that now I meet with our executive team members every quarter across the organization. And so I can have that specialized conversation with our executive directors about what do they need to do in their departments in order to make safeguarding more alive and more visible, so that they're actively practicing this on a regular basis and so that it doesn't fall off the agenda. I also meet with the board a couple of times a year, either to deliver training or give them updates on our action plan and how we've progressed that. And that's fairly consistent. And I also meet with our risk committee either monthly or bi-monthly. And so that does, keeping that on the agenda has made it a much more present topic of conversation across the BRC. The only other things I'm going to add is, one, I also wanted to reiterate what Joe said about no reports is not a good thing. If you're not getting safeguarding reports, that's not the chance to say, oh, everything's fine, let's rest on our laurels. It actually is a warning flag that you need to look at what systems are working and what systems are not working. Can you still hear me? Okay. So it's very important to not take zero reports as that you have a safe culture and that things are not happening. And that's both internally for your staff and volunteers and your community members, but it's also for your donors. And then also I would suggest that leaders consider how your safeguarding leads are placed within the organization in terms of having enough seniority to have those conversations with executive members and board members, but also have an ability to reach out to the front line and make sure that they can hear where they can report and what is safe. I think I'll leave it there for now and pass back to Joe. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Debbie. That's great, thank you. And just to say as well to those in the room, to be honest, actually, just so you're aware, some organisations actually now, they anticipate a certain number of reports according to the level of need, the number of people in distress, that they're serving, and how many staff they've got in the field. So, that I'm very grateful actually to Debbie for flagging that again, that we have to expect a certain number of reports and we need to be prepared to do that. And the key part of that actually is the type of leadership that we have in place who is open and willing to respond to that. And I just wonder whether or not I could come back to you, Debbie, just briefly and ask you about the role of leadership in modelling safeguarding behaviour. I know you touched on it, but I just wonder if you could just amplify it a little bit more. That would be great.
Yeah, I think it's many of the things that we've been talking about for the past 2 days. It's creating that environment of trust that people that they know that you're going to respond if something comes up. So it's walking the walk, it's talking the talk. It's making sure that your relationships demonstrate the types of relationships that you want to see across the organization that you're in charge of, and that people know that they can approach if they need to. So I think it's it's about building the trust in the systems that you have, in the people that you have, that if an investigation is needed, that they know that the process will be fair, so that it might mean that Stella will talk about survivor-centered approaches shortly, but that you will have, if someone is accused of something, they will have a fair shake, as well as the person who is the victim or survivor. They will also be able to share their story, and until an outcome is determined, then it should stay confidential within that space, and the leadership will stay separate from it until final decisions need to be made.
Thank you, that's great. I think for the interesting time, I think we probably need to move over onto Edla now, actually, and come back with other questions later, if that's all right. So Edla, if I can hand over to you, and I know you're going to talk about policy and prevention. So thank you very much. A key pillar in the safeguarding framework. Thank you.
Hello. Yeah, thank you for that. So just rolling on from what Debbie has been talking about, what does the leadership that is committed to safeguarding use? That would be policies. So as Joe had alluded earlier, we all tend to use the Interagency Standing Committee principles. If we had time, we would have been able to print those out and then you'd be able to look through them. But just a very quick run through. The first one places sexual exploitation and abuse as a form of gross misconduct. So that has to go into the HR policy. The second one talks about abuse of children, sexual activity with children, and at what age, how do we define what a child is? So most organizations, and I suppose the Red Cross and the IFRC, we work across many different countries, many different jurisdictions, where the age of majority depends. But as global actors, we follow the age of 18, whatever the age of 18, because that differs from place to place based on the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And then there's a third one that talks about exploitation, what that means. It's about exchanging things. And the fourth one discourages relations between humanitarian workers and beneficiaries. And then the fifth one is about reporting. And the sixth one is the one that talks about what Debbie has been talking about, the fact that leadership and all of us are responsible for this, and that we need to maintain an environment which prevents this from happening. So the typical format of a policy is just like any other. There would be an introduction, date, time frame. You need to write when you're going to review it. You need to put in the scope and the purpose, and then the definitions. So as Joe alluded earlier, there's the broader definition of the term safeguarding, but for most agencies, when they talk about safeguarding, they're talking about sexual exploitation and abuse. And in some cases, there are some agencies that add on sexual harassment as a component of this, but in other organizations, then they put that under the HR, under the mandate of HR. There are also organizations that consider child safeguarding or broader child protection under this. But at the bare minimum, they consider sexual exploitation and abuse of children. Apart from that, there would be various principles that we use in safeguarding or PSCA, such as zero tolerance. You need to put in that your organization would have zero tolerance to that. The accountability that you have. So for most of us, we are accountable to our donors, and under the precipice of accountability to affected populations, we are also accountable to the populations that we serve, because that is what we mostly do. Then there would be the principle of accessibility. The populations we serve, the people that we are working with, need to have access to some of the services that support them. Then there's what we call the survivor-centered approach, which means we put the victim or the survivor, whatever language you want to use, at the center. They need to be able to be at the core of every action that we have. It might be difficult depending on the jurisdiction where you are, because under this approach, we say that it is up to the survivor to decide where they want to go, that they need to make an informed choice. And so we give them support and knowledge of what sorts of services are available to them, and then they have to choose. But in some jurisdictions, when there's a case of sexual misconduct, under the law, there's automatic prosecution. So that there are all those sorts of things to consider. Policy positions would include the core aspects of the IAC core principles that I alluded to. And then there would be minimum standards that you can also include in your policy. So for example, things like induction for new staff, training and awareness. Debbie was talking about training for leadership, but there would be training for different categories of people. So humanitarian response leads would need specific training to be able to understand how to implement safeguarding policies, strategies in a humanitarian setting. The monitoring evaluation teams would need a little bit of training to see how to incorporate that. People working on community outreach would need to think through community-based feedback and reporting mechanisms. How do you put in a safeguarding component in a way that is safe for the survivor, that is confidential? Remember we said that we need to have, some of the principles include confidentiality. We need to work on prevention and safety of everybody involved. There would also need to be a reporting mechanism in your policy, reporting mechanisms, and something about timely reporting. One of the key reasons why timely reporting is important is, for those of you who are familiar with gender-based violence, we are supposed to report an incident within 72 hours, because within that time, that we can save a life. We can prevent diseases such as HIV, we can prevent pregnancy, not get rid of the pregnancy, but pregnancy prevention, the medical. So that is part of the main reason why it has to be done within 72 hours. So this could be a guideline in a policy why a report needs to come in within a certain amount of time. I think Stella is going to go through later about the response, and then maybe more of that would be covered. The reporting mechanisms need to be timely, as I've indicated, comprehensive. They need to be culturally sensitive. The community and the staff need to participate in that. So it can't just be an email or a hotline. Sometimes it would be a person in the community who's already trusted, who's already receiving things. Then we need to have safe recruitment. This is usually a HR role. When it comes to safe recruitment, there are many different things. I just want to give you an example. I think earlier Joe alluded to the Haiti crisis in Oxfam. So I just want to share with you one learning that we had that is something that I think we have learned across the sector now. It's a learning that Oxfam had. So one of the perpetrators in Haiti was given an opportunity to resign because at that time, that was within the sector, that was the practice. If you do something wrong as a senior leader, you're given the option of resigning. Unfortunately, they managed to get referencing within the organization, and they moved on to West Africa and other places and continued to perpetrate similar offenses. So now what happened within the organization is we have centralized referencing. We have certain particular senior people within the organization who are the ones who issue the referencing. And they are also referenced periodically. They go through a reference check periodically, I think annually, to make sure that they don't have any pending cases. And what that does is, it means that I cannot leave the organization and then my colleague would send me on a letterhead a recommendation. Whenever anybody requires a reference from a staff member, it goes through the central system. My colleagues will have a chance to write what they thought of me, including my manager, but first it goes in centrally, and then the organization checks if there were any cases against this person, and then they would be able to put that in place. So that's just an example of a learning that we had from that crisis. And I think within the sector, we have common systems for, I don't want to say blacklisting, but where we have a system where we are able to check the referencing for people who would like to work in the sector. It's really important to have whistleblower protection and to have a statement in your policy against malicious reporting. Whistleblower reporting means that if somebody reports in good faith, either a rumor, something they see on their own behalf or on behalf of other people, and they do that in good faith, then it does not fall back on them. And malicious reporting just prevents people from filing reports for revenge or their own personal issues. And then you need to write something about complaints against partners, different sorts of partners, and external like-minded organizations. If your colleagues are working in a particular location and they hear something that another organization has done, what are you going to do about that? So one solution for that is to go through the PSCA network. So it's important for leaders to assign people to work together with PSCA networks in your area of operation. You need to write something about partnerships, focal points, something around risk assessments. There are also other aspects of safeguarding apart from the sexual exploitation and abuse, such as digital safeguarding. I had, when I came in, I had people talking about AI. So there's the whole area of social media, the digital context and all that. And then all of us work with youth and children. So you can decide to incorporate this into one policy, or you can have separate policies depending on what you want to have. Then you also have to put in roles and responsibilities of people. Sometimes responsible persons are appointed, and then, so for example, the focal point system, which is something that we use in the sector, and so on, but you need to clearly indicate what the roles and responsibilities are. I think both Debbie and Joe alluded to the fact that safeguarding is everybody's responsibility, but at the same time we've been saying that leadership has specific roles, and so also different technical areas, whether you're doing budgeting or you're doing logistics or meal, we all have different roles and responsibilities. Where policy contravenes national law, what do you do about that? So national laws usually should be followed with advice from your legal teams, but the policy will usually be implemented if standards are higher than the national laws. So organizations operating in specific countries are registered, and administrative law in different countries covers your HR policy and the administrative policies that you have. So you're legally allowed to carry out those administrative policies like investigations and so on. So you're actually operating legally when you do that. Then the idea of youth, as I indicated, we need to protect youth when we are using social media, digital platforms, and remember that some youth are children under the age of 18. And when we are talking about digital safeguarding, I think it's safe for most agencies to follow the European Union GDPR principles. But then also in some jurisdictions, there could be laws around that as well. You also need to indicate how a complaint can be raised. And policies usually go hand in hand with implementation strategies that need to have budgets, responsible persons, and indicators which are SMART. So they need to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound. On the area of recognition and prevention, which is also something I'm meant to be talking on, now beyond the policy, we need to have safe recruitment. I've already talked about the centralized referencing system. And also data privacy, legal risks, gaps where there are no adequate reports. These are all issues that need to be looked at by the leadership. What should HR do? You can do your own reference checks. For example, you can request people to do police certificates of good conduct, which are required from certain employees periodically, maybe every 3 years. But this should also be done in conjunction with a self-declaration form to strengthen that. So this can be filled alongside the usual conflict of interest declarations that people follow. And the good thing about that is if somebody signs that they have not been part of any PSEA misconduct, and then later on there is proof, then you have a reason to take action. And this happens in jurisdictions where you're not allowed to push staff to have certificate of good conduct, or you're not allowed to write negative things in the referencing of the people. Then we have the codes of conduct. The code of conduct usually sort of outlines principles of ethics and integrity within the organization. But it's really, really important to have the ISC core principles also mentioned within the code of conduct, including all these other things that we've talked about. The level of effort of focal persons, the amount of time that your focal persons put into safeguarding activities, and also that of other staff. So it's maybe the job descriptions, performance indicators, appraisals. You can consider putting safeguarding responsibilities in those. Also, you could ask questions around safeguarding when you're doing your hiring processes. Of course, it will be different if you're hiring a full-time safeguarding person, if you're hiring a leader, or if you're hiring somebody else in different capacity. So the questions would be different, but it's important to put that there. HR policies need to include sanctions for PSEA, as mentioned earlier. Then there is also, it's also important to have standard inductions and training for new staff. So there would be induction, and it's different from a training. The focal persons need to have specific training to enable them carry out whatever role the organization wants them to have. Usually the focal people stand in as a form of reporting mechanism between the leadership and the staff or the partners. So they form that gap, because in some jurisdictions people prefer to talk to somebody rather than go through the hotlines and the emails and so on. Safeguarding goes beyond the organization. It has to be considered in programs. You have to look at safeguarding within partner organizations such as the CBOs, the national NGOs, and even government partners. So one good practice to look at is when you're working with government, have a look at the Civil Service Code of Conduct. And when you're going to do the training, you can negotiate that. You have somebody, preferably a lawyer from the government, taking the team through the Civil Service Code of Conduct. You'll find that a lot of these principles are there, and many civil servants sign them, and then they never look at them again. So before you do the safeguarding training, once you take them through the Civil Service Code of Conduct, it will be easy for them to see that they are basically the same principles, maybe not in the same language, but that it's not so different. So when you have partners, you could have zero tolerance clauses and sanctions. We've talked about the code of conduct. And then the contracts of staff members with partners, with various capacities of people, volunteers, consultants, should have a clause about the zero tolerance that the organization has, and what sanctions would be put in place if they are found guilty. So I've gone beyond talking about policies and strategies and talked a little bit more about the pillar on safe recruitment, training, and partnership management and programmatic risk. So it's really important.
Thanks very much indeed, Adla. That's really helpful. Thank you. I'm just going to hand on. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm just very aware of time and wanting to give people an opportunity to ask questions later after your very comprehensive, very helpful and insightful overview there. If I could move over now to Stella from UNICEF, who is going to talk about response. And I should just say that that is an area that many of us, I was at an interagency meeting only yesterday and discovered that less than 50% of people get the level of response that they actually need. So I think it's something for all of us as a sector. And, I'll hand over to Stella just now to tell us her learnings and her advice. Many thanks, Stella. Over to you.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. We cannot close the safeguarding loop without talking about reporting and victims assistance. And our conversation is going to to be on that. So basically, reporting mechanisms are a safeguarding, protection, and accountability tool that allows people to actually bring feedback to service providers. And it normally takes into account the local context. When you're establishing a good reporting mechanism, you have to bear in mind the local context. Is it a development context? Is it a humanitarian context? Are people on flight? You know, that will actually inform you to design something that is relevant for their needs. It also takes account of the culture of the people. You are not going to impose on the people what they're not familiar with or what is against their culture. So you need to find the positive aspects of the culture that can work with a feedback mechanism. You need to take account of the language of the people. That means you have to translate IEC materials that you design to inform people about the existence of the reporting mechanism in their local languages so that they understand. You need to consider literacy levels. You're not going to put telephone or suggestion boxes if people are not educated, especially in the communities. So you need to be able to consider that. But even when you are designing mechanisms for your personnel, you really have to be cognizant of all these areas, especially the culture and the context. A good reporting mechanism should be based on the needs of the people it's designed for. If you're designing it for personnel, you have to consult them and ask them what channels can actually work for them. Yeah, it should be safe. They should not have a fear of retaliation when they report. That means you should encourage open door policy. You should, discuss the issue of confidence and trust. You should instill trust, and they should know that when they report, there will be a positive outcome of what they report. It should be confidential so that they're not exposed. If it's not confidential, people will actually fear. If you put a suggestion box under a CCTV camera, it's not confidential, right? It's not safe either because people will see who has actually gone to the suggestion box. And especially if the suggestion box is not covering everything, but it's designed basically for reporting safeguarding concerns of OC allegations. In fact, we are urged to avoid creating mechanisms that only take in concerns of safeguarding and C allegations. It should be sometimes positive feedback. You know, it should be commending a colleague who has worked very hard in the course of the month and things like that. You would realize that in some institutions, they place suggestion boxes in toilets because it's one of the safest places. No one will go what you've gone to do there, you know. And in other contexts, they place such in hospital facilities and so on, which is very safe and all that. It has to be transparent. People need to know what actions are there for the kind of feedbacks that they provide. Sometimes they're reporting anonymously, so you don't know who has brought the feedback, but you can provide feedback through the programs you have, you know, radio engagement, community campaigns, and things like that to maintain that trust. So they should also know what the parameters of the reporting mechanism is, and they should know that there's transparency and trust. They should also know the time scope within which they can receive feedback. So you have to ensure that you have defined the time scope when, how long it takes for people to receive feedback if they actually launch a complaint or if they bring positive feedback. If you leave it open, it can actually bring the issue of discomfort and lack of trust. It should have clear parameters. Your reporting mechanism should define what it takes. And I did tell you earlier that we are discouraged from establishing mechanisms that only take C allegations or safeguarding concerns, right? However, you should still be able to define the complaints it takes. Is it also addressing sexual harassment, for example, harassment amongst ourselves? Or is it, taking concerns from communities? Is it for personnel and so on? Again, if you leave it open without defining the scope, it will raise a lot of expectations which you may not be able to meet, and it will bring in a lack of trust from the people you've designed it for. You should always provide feedback to the complainant. As I mentioned to you, sometimes you don't know who they are, but there are always creative, proactive ways of providing the feedback to them. A good mechanism should always be adjusted based on the feedback provided. You should be able to every maybe 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, do adjustments, do consultation, you know, to understand the needs of the people. In fact, you cannot do a good mechanism without really doing community consultations. You know, you really always have to, because of the different needs in the community, the different demographics have different needs. Children do not have the same needs as adults. Elderly people, people living with disabilities, and so on. Others prefer, you know, in-person, others prefer telephone, depending on the coverage of the telephone, and so on. So you always have to be cognizant. If your reporting mechanism includes in-person, for example, and you've put a 23, 25-year-old lady in some contexts, an 80-old year or 90-old year man may not feel comfortable to come and disclose something that has affected them personally. So you have to bear all that in mind. As Edla mentioned, it's always good to indicate in your reporting mechanism that it's an accountability tool. However, reporting has to be done in good faith. If someone brings an allegation in good faith, even if investigations determine that it's not true, they will not be punished for that because they're dispensing the responsibility entrusted in their hands through the code of conduct, through the standards of conduct, and so on. But if they knew the falsity of the case and they bring, just because they're taking advantage of an existing mechanism, they have personal vendetta with this person and so on, that's misconduct and they should be punished. And your system should actually spell that out. You shouldn't leave it closed. It's very important. In the context of PAC, especially in the UN system and with our partners, it's mandatory reporting. But within the mandatory reporting, we also always urge people to take care of the safety and the safety of the victim. If you know your reporting will actually expose that victim in more danger, you have to find a better way of doing it. So reporting should never compromise the safety of the victim. We know that some cultures are extremely harsh, and if they know that something has happened to the daughter or to the young male and so on, the repercussion can actually be bad. It will be very negative. So you always have to use your discretion in determining that. That should not discourage you from reporting. However, you need to take cognizance of that situation. So as I mentioned, reporting mechanism is a huge accountability tool, and it reinforces safeguarding. And you cannot operate without reporting mechanism if you really are doing safeguarding and protection from sexual exploitation and abuse, protecting children and vulnerable adults. You always have to have a reporting mechanism, and it actually has a protection motivation. It has a prevention motivation as well. If someone knows that they are going to be reported because the system is actually functional, they will think twice before they commit actually the offense. So it's important to actually have strong reporting mechanism as a measure to prevent safeguarding concerns and abuse of sexual exploitation and abuse. As I mentioned earlier, you should have multi-channels, right? Because of the different needs of the community. You shouldn't lose sight of that. Sometimes, because of resources, you are curtailed, but it's important to work with sister agencies. In many contexts, there are networks, you know, communities of practice and all that. Make sure you're part of it so that you are able to complement each other's effort and you make use of the resources that are available from each other. So it should not limit you at all. It's not possible for you to put all the channels sometimes due to constraints, but if you are collaborating with other sister agencies, then you will be able to close that loop. And you can always use a contextualized standards and operating procedures and information sharing protocols that are, you know, consultatively developed that can actually help you to achieve your goal in reporting. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Stella. We're going to throw open now for questions. So while you're having a think, I'm going to ask Stella a question about how we're ensuring that safeguarding is survivor-centred and trauma-informed in humanitarian settings.
Please.
Because obviously we know there's a lot of emergencies that are happening across the world now. So over to you, please. Thank you.
Thank you, yeah. So it's one thing to report, and it's the other to ensure that the person who brings these complaints to you actually get the services they need. right? Again, you cannot, reporting alone cannot close the loop. You always have to ensure that the person gets the support they need. And it's not possible for one entity to have all the needs of the survivor addressed, all the resources, all the services. So this tells us to actually have, to work with other entities to map out existing service providers and services. Yeah, so always you should have an updated list. And again, if you work with interagency, networks and all that, you will be able to access this information. Like here in Kenya, we've done an extensive mapping of existing services in all the 47 counties of Kenya. So we have these resources. So if you're based in Kenya, we really recommend that you actually you join the network so that you take, you enjoy the services that we have in the network. And you have to have a structured system in your organization to do referral. You shouldn't refer by word of mouth. Some years back, I was working in Malawi, and one case was recorded as 15 cases, just because they were doing, referral by word of mouth. They were not writing anything down. So the person goes to health center, they're recorded as, victim number 1. They go to legal service, that entity also records as a new a case, and so on. So if you have a structured system within which you use to refer to services, then you're able actually to track how many cases you have received in a month, what is the trend, what cases are we actually receiving, have they received the services they need, do we actually have weaknesses in this service, do we have gaps, what can we do more, and what efforts can we improve to actually ensure that this particular kind of incidences are reduced, and so on. So you should always have that kind of thing. Another thing is the typical kind of services they receive are not anything different. They include health services, they include security, shelter, they include income generating activities to alleviate the vulnerability that causes them to actually face safeguarding issues and exploitation. They also include other protection services such as, financial support, skills improvement, and all that. This also actually includes investigations, right? Investigation is a huge safeguarding and accountability tool, because you cannot just sweep a case under the carpet just because you don't have the system. We are urged to actually have these systems in place, right? And there has been now a new development where entities sit together and they agree to have a pool of investigators. It turns out to be cheap, it's cultural, it's more contextual, they have no language barriers, they have access to the victims and perpetrators. So if you feel you are limited, or if your organization is small in such a way that it's not credible for you to have an in-house investigator, you can opt for that instead of actually contracting a third party who you pay money for. Because many times the pool of investigators provide these services pro bono. Like the Kenya network right now is actually enrolling participants from the network member organizations to do CA investigations training. And Red Cross is actually part of the interagency PSC network. So we're establishing this body to actually provide such services to our members pro bono. So we encourage you to actually do that. Sometimes the allegations are on falsity, as I mentioned to you. So it's actually in the interest of your organization that you do investigation to protect the integrity of your own institution, but also to protect the survivor, to also protect the perpetrator. Because if it's on falsity, the perpetrator is actually innocent until proven guilty, right? Even in law. So if you don't do investigation, then you will not be able to even cause consequence. You may not be able to protect someone. You should not dismiss someone just because an allegation has come against them. You have to prove if they're guilty or not, right? So victim support systems are very critical tools of safeguarding and protection and accountability. And so you cannot talk about reporting mechanism, you cannot talk about prevention if you don't have those systems. And again, to protect the communities, if they come and they report and they know nothing is going to happen, they have no services available to them, they will not report, they will be discouraged. So the absence of cases is not the absence or is not the lack of prevalence of concerns of safeguarding or sexual exploitation and abuse. On the contrary, it's a sign that the systems we have are perhaps not trusted, or they're not contextual, right? Or they're not cultural. So it's a red signal for us to do something about those and ensure that we adjust them, we consult with the communities, we forge trust, and we make the systems suitable for their different needs. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Stella. Very helpful. I'm afraid I can't actually see any hands raised in the room if anybody's asking questions. I don't know if Milanoy pass them on.
Joe, before we go to the questions, maybe just to wrap it up and just conclude in terms of where are we at as Red Cross and Red Crescent, even as we open it up to questions. I think it's important to recognize the different aspects we've talked about: leadership, prevention, and response. Yes, we do have national societies that have policies in place. In Africa region, we have about 34 national societies with policies in place. But the biggest challenge we face, and this is a good conversation to discuss as well as we bring up questions, we have policies, but many are not actioned. Why? Why are we scared of safeguarding? Yet it's one of the areas that ensures we have trust, accountability with communities, with donors, internally amongst ourselves. But it's still something that people feel is so complex. Why is it? Leadership has been pointed out as one of the key areas to ensure that it actually works. But sometimes that is where we face the greatest challenge, because we do present policies, and I sit in a place where I'm privileged to work with national societies through policy development, actioning, and everything. But sometimes, why do we fear passing safeguarding policies? One of the things we've tried to do as well as the IFRC is develop, for example, model policies. Egla talked about what needs to be in a PSA policy. We've made it easier and took the interagency standards and put like a model policy, a national society that can use to develop their own policy. So we've tried to make it easier. If you want to develop your own policy, there's a model policy in place. So it's easier to align and ensure that you have the right standards in place. But why do we still fear having policies in place? And I think it's a good thing to ask ourselves. Yet it's one of the mechanisms to ensure that we build trust and we're accountable amongst all of us as well. Something very critical as well we've tried to do is, in all our emergency operations at the moment, one of the things we've put in place as IFRC is that we require that any grants we give for any emergency operation, if it's a DREF, especially for the DREFs, it's a requirement that you do a child safeguarding risk analysis as a basic bare minimum. This is one of the things we're putting into account as well, to ensure that we do take child safeguarding critically. And this is through an assessment of looking internally as a movement and saying we need to do better when it comes to child safeguarding. And now we have the child safeguarding risk analysis. But sometimes we still struggle to get that. And sometimes it's always good to look at, it's not like saying that you're not doing well, but I think doing a child safeguarding risk analysis, for example, helps you to understand what do we need to do better. So all these mechanisms we're putting in place is not to say that we want to showcase that a national society is not doing well. No, but it's really aligning to ensure that you do put the right mechanisms in place to understand where do you need to start from. Because sometimes when you do the child safeguarding risk analysis, we realize actually it makes you reflect and see we're actually doing well as a national society. So I'm just trying to encourage us to not be scared of action plans, doing self-assessment, sitting down and reflecting on where are we at in terms of safeguarding and what do we need to do better. And we've tried to make it as easy as possible. And at the same time, we've had so much progress. For example, for us as the Red Cross and Red Crescent, we have PJ focal points who've been doubling up as safeguarding focal points. But now, from having the conversations, we realize that national societies are starting to see, actually, we do need a safeguarding person full-time. And now we are seeing the roles slowly being separated. You know, understanding it's important to have a PGI person, it's important to have a safeguarding person. And I think that's great progress to see as well. And we have many of them in the room as well who can give us practical examples on the work they're doing, but really encouraging as well that we shouldn't just have safeguarding focal points and give them the lowest position possible. Because this work is really important. They need to be able to engage with leadership. They need to be trusted by staff to be able to provide the required support that they need. But sometimes we face challenges where if we recommend to have a safeguarding focal point and the National Society agrees, they're given the lowest position possible in the National Society. Let's reflect on that as well and see how best can we give them actually the platform they require to be able to do the work that they need to do, to be trusted by staff and volunteers. And I think it takes time as well. This is the conversation that takes a long time, and we need to build trust. Even the organization sitting here, I don't think any of us are perfect. I don't think Oxfam has made it, UNICEF has made it in terms of safeguarding. There's still so many things that we're working on, including as FRC, on trust in reporting. But it's a continuous process of, let's not have a one conversation. I think one of the things we do, like when I'm reviewing the drafts of the emergency appeals, I always put a comment, and people always say, I always ask the same comment. I always say, in your briefing, do we include briefings on PGI and safeguarding to the staff and volunteers? Then they say, but we've already done it. But I'm like, this is a new operation. In every operation that you're doing, always remember, because we do have briefings for the people who are responding in emergency operations. Let's always include safeguarding briefings as part of the briefing. Because it's like we're always pushing, please include this, but it should be automatic. It should be a reminder in everything that we do. That is automatically as part of the briefing package in any emergency operation or response that we are working on. Let's not say that we briefed them when they joined. Yeah, we've gone sometimes for monitoring to the field, and sometimes when I speak to volunteers, I'll ask them, okay, you've signed the code of conduct, you've had a session on safeguarding, what exactly does it, do you know what it says? But some of them will tell me, honestly, Milanoi, I signed. I joined and I was told to sign the document. Let's remember to take them through those briefings. As we are getting in new volunteers, let's take them through systematically, and let's get the right people to do it. Something very, very important. Sometimes we're in the field, and people will say, yeah, we did the briefing. I ask exactly who did the briefing. Is this someone who's been trained on safeguarding? So they'll actually give the right information to ensure that they know where to report, where the referral pathways. These are very critical things to look at. Let's not just say we did the briefing, but let's ensure that they get the right kind of briefing, quality briefings with the right people, and ensure that we have different people actually taking up the role of doing the briefings. Let's not assume anyone can do the briefing, because sometimes we've realized that we can pass on the wrong information, which actually can do an injustice as well. So really just wanted to point out those key issues as well. Thank you as we go to the questions. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Milanoi. You've done my job for me, my dear. I don't need to, I can step off now, so it's all good. Thank you very much. Can we have any questions from the floor, please? You've heard a lot today. Oh, great. Thank you.
We have the SG Kenya Red Cross with the first hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you. I've really been looking forward to this session, and for many reasons. One, it's and I think some of the comments I want to make is more around sharing with the leadership around certain experiences, questions, issues that you need to think about. Not necessarily questions, but have one particular question that has bothered me and I've never found an answer for. And I'm hoping today maybe the ladies on the stage will find a miracle response for that. So maybe I'll start with the comments and then I'll end with the questions. The first one is for national society leadership. The issues that are raised around safeguarding, including the best practices, the system to put in, the mechanisms, the experiences. If you make an attempt to walk this journey alone, it will be long and miserable. So don't reinvent the wheel. It may look like such a huge task, but it's a task that we have institutions and individuals within the movement who have been thinking through this for a while. And feel free to reach out and establish a connection so that we can all assist each other. I don't think there is a single solution, and we can't say that there is a single national society or a single organization that has the answers to it all. So you may be seated and thinking, these things are too deep and too complicated. They are, but they're important, and they're so important that we can't delay them simply because we are fearing that we don't have the right resources within the national society. So that's the first point I wanted to make. The second one is, and I want to also talk about a cultural issue. The cultural issue is let's accept that there are certain things that we might have thought are acceptable 5 years ago that are just not acceptable now. And a better part of the safeguarding issues around a change in expectation in the generation that we are dealing with. I give you an example. I deal with very young people at the Kenya Red Cross. I think the average age was 29, the last time I checked of the employees. Very young people, different view sets of the world, of issues, of what is around them. So that shift in generation around employees, around service providers, requires you to accept and understand that there's also a shift in expectations in what you say, what you do, how you do it, and so on. There's a time when I started working, there are certain things that we accepted as jokes, and right now nobody will laugh at them, they're abuse. And it's important to internalize that. And I think there are a range of practices that, from a cultural perspective, including here in Africa, maybe we thought they're not very complicated, but they have become complicated. They have become complicated to make jokes about people, including about marriage status, for example. When we were growing up, it was not uncommon for an older person to say, being single is a sign of responsibility. Right now, that is harassment in the workplace. The thing is, I'm just giving you the most common of examples, but it means we just have responsibility from a leadership perspective to think deeply about things that time has changed and are no longer acceptable, and lead a conversation around that second one. So we can't get away from this by saying, but in my context, this was okay. Cultural context, this was fine. Cultures have been shifting, and that shift has to be accepted. I want to talk about the point to the culture shift. The issues that are being raised, there's no single silver bullet to find a solution. It just requires a continuous conversation, purposive conversation within the institution. And why do I say so? Safeguarding is not for persons with their title safeguarding. We have, lucky as an institution, for example, we have individuals who are fully committed to that, their full-time role to promote, but safeguarding is not for safeguarding officers, or it's not for protection and gender inclusion officers, or for internal audit. Safeguarding is a leadership question, and that ownership at leadership level, and leadership level is not one person. It's not the Secretary General or the President. It is the individuals who collectively have a responsibility for designing the direction of an institution, heads of departments, heads of regions, and so on. And that taking a pause back from your day-to-day operations once in a while and saying, today we're going to have a discussion around our safeguarding issues, we'll have continuous improvement in the society or in the organization. But now I come to the problem I wanted to raise and the question I wanted to ask. We have had, and because it is a safe space of open discussion, as an institution, we've had a challenge around the safeguarding issues from a reporting perspective, especially when reporting is anonymous. That's number one. And second, when we insist, which we have to, that the reporting mechanisms have to be victim-centered. We always forget that there is a risk that a person being accused becomes a victim. And the one that we struggle with a lot is, how do you deal with lack of good faith at the initial stages of reporting? Because there are contexts in which the person reporting has nothing to lose. As in, I've reported anonymously. Even if it is discovered that I engaged in bad faith, nobody will know. I did it anonymously. That keeps me awake at night, and that gives me sleepless nights from an institutional perspective. And unfortunately, I don't think the solution to all these questions that I've always been asking is the answer still has to be victim centered, survivor-centered. I've grown to be honest, and I dislike it, but I've grown to dislike the two words the last 1 year. I think we just need to maybe rethink of what else to call this, while at the same time being committed to the principle behind being victim-centered or survivor-oriented. because at the end of the day, you know, the assumptions that we make in reporting systems is first and foremost that people will take it up in good faith. There are 3 cases here that we have looked at, and at the end of the day, you can see the trend of the bad faith. You can see the trend of, I intend to victimize the person who I am reporting, and yet by the time that question is answered fully, that person is destroyed, as in, and that's what I struggle with every day. How do I become responsive to reporting mechanism while at the same time not opening up an opportunity for ill-mannered, ill-willed people to make use of the system for abuse? And as I said, I'm hoping the ladies will give us a solution for this one. Because to be honest, this has been a true struggle, and I'm sure there are many institutions. And I don't want us to reach a point, where we say we will have to have a sieving mechanism for reporting, and that will be the worst direction to ever take from a protection mechanism. If you censure communication, if you put it out there, in fact, you know, the challenge, I'm sorry, from Oxfam, the challenge we've had around when the comment is made that anybody who misuses the system ought to have a consequence around it. The other way of reading is that reporting gets punished, because it is rarely that people get the background information that this person actually reported in bad faith, was engaged in breach of rules. It will be summarized as somebody reported an incident and then the person got punished. And that is what we are running away from an institutional perspective. So for my colleagues, Secretary Generals and President, all I'm telling you is that these things are difficult, but they are difficult because their value is also a lot. And we all just have to walk this journey together. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that very insightful comment. I will pass it over, I know, to colleagues who are there, but I just want to make a couple of quick points actually from the IFRC perspective. Is a lot, one, and I know colleagues will talk about underreporting concerns, but 2, I would certainly say that this goes much to your intake process, that actually the vast majority, you know, to the extent that anybody gets, you know, quote, malicious or false reports, they can usually be screened out at intake level, because when you receive your reports at investigation level, you always check for credibility. Have you got enough information? Do those people, you know, could this incident have happened? You know, is it possible that by triggering an investigation, you will establish the facts? I'm sorry I don't have colleagues from OIAI here to support this, but believe me, you know, I know that Chris Wallace, who is our Director for Audit and Investigations, will always say in over 20 years, he's only ever come across one case of you know, so-called malicious reporting. Our biggest issue actually is underreporting. But I do take on board what you're saying, and I completely agree absolutely that, you know, anonymous reporting there is an option for it to be misused, but that's certainly not our experience, I'll be honest, at the IFRC. I will hand over to colleagues on the panel for their views and then bring it round. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you so much. I would like to add to what Joe mentioned. First and foremost, the reason why anonymous reporting is allowed is to give people the opportunity to feel safe. Sometimes people feel threatened. Sometimes people don't trust someone who is entrusted with the responsibility of receiving allegations. Sometimes people fear, you know, to approach an institution or so. So basically, any case or any allegation that is reported, first and foremost, is taken seriously. First and foremost. 2, no one will be punished if they're not found guilty. And I think that is the word of encouragement I want to give you. No one will be punished if they are not found guilty. And in fact, it's good to be investigated. If someone actually alleges that you are involved in misconduct, it's good to offer yourself to be investigated so that you're cleared of that. Otherwise, it will continue tormenting you, it will continue to affect you, and so on. So it's a protection mechanism even for the perpetrator. That's what we need to appreciate. We need to have consistent messaging that investigation has protection motivation, first and foremost. It will protect the perpetrator, it will also protect the alleged survivor. It's not always the case that the person who is reporting is the actual survivor. Sometimes it's a third party actually reporting. Because we are told if you suspect, if someone brings a case to you, you should forward it to the right channel. So if someone did that and I forward it, it's not really my mistake, but it's incumbent upon the investigator and the investigation system to actually establish the falsity or the truth of it. Yeah? I know, of course, psychologically there's an effect because my name perhaps has been mentioned in misconduct and so on. But we also know that in this world we have so many enemies around us. We are our own enemies, right? So from that perspective, sometimes you cannot avoid it. There was a case in Yemen where a colleague reported the other because indeed he observed something. But investigations established that there was no misconduct, but the colleague who was implicated, who was alleged, came and thanked the other and said, if you didn't report, I wouldn't know that there were corridor talks even about me. I wouldn't know that that is how I've been perceived. This is because the organization has done the correct thing to actually inculcate in the people that there is trust, that there is no bad reasoning behind being reported, and that actually helps with building the culture of reporting. If we are not suspecting each other, if I trust you, yeah, I know you're not actually acting in bad faith. I trust you. I know you're dispensing your responsibility under the code of conduct we have all signed. So it's very important for us to actually psychologically come out of that and maintain consistent messaging, even in the communities, even among ourselves and within the actors that we are serving. Now, how do I know someone has reported in good faith, or how do I know someone who reported in good faith, or who, there was a second question you asked. I think you said good faith reporting can put you in problem, right? In simple terms. That's what you said. But again, the investigation will find out, yeah, if your motivation was actually good or your motivation was not good. Because the investigation will actually be very thorough. It's done by professionals, and normally it will also make use of the available local context and resources to actually give information and all that. So the truth will generally come out at the end of the day. Yeah? So my piece of advice is it's really good to be investigated. I know it's very hard for this to sink. It's very hard for us to believe and trust because we are very protective of ourselves and so on. But in a mechanism like this, if someone suspects, it's better actually they report you than not report you, because just imagine if you're passing here and people are just, people don't even feel safe that you pass around them. I used to work in the serial response, and the staff thought I was a contact person. Each time I'm passing, you see their behavior and so on. I had to tell the chief of mission to actually make sure that the staff understand my role in the institution. I was not there about policing people, following people, no. I didn't have friends initially because people misunderstood my role in the organization, right? So I think it's very important for us to do the correct thing from the beginning, and everyone has to do their part, yeah? Management has to take their leadership responsibility serious. Program managers have to take that seriously. Everyone has to play their bit, and the efforts will converge, yeah? Because it's our collective responsibility to ensure that we have the correct messaging, the correct understanding, we correct a good and trusting environment in the office such that we are not against each other, and we don't suspect, right? It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort and all that. But I think there's opportunity to do that. Yeah, there's an opportunity to do that. I really hope I've responded to your question well. Thank you.
If there's time, I can add on a little bit. I like what you said about talking to colleagues and building a sort of network of support, because setting up a safeguarding system is a process. What you're trying to do when you're trying to take safeguarding seriously is to set up a system. It takes time. People need to trust it. And my experience is that when you set up the system, in fact, the initial reports might not even be about safeguarding. Sometimes people start reporting bullying and harassment, or an issue with their manager, like he didn't sign for my per diem. So for us who are dealing with those on the other side of the reporting, we just have to try to make sure that whatever report comes through, you find whatever solution that there needs to be, so that people start trusting the system. And then later on, they will now actually do the actual report. Setting up the system and the process means continuous engagement with your staff, with your partners. And one of the best practices is once you've done the induction and the relevant training, it's important to follow up with discussions. I think, Milana, you talked about talking about safeguarding in meetings, like putting it on the agenda. Continuous engagement with people, focus group discussions, even gender disaggregated, team disaggregated. That is very, very important. So when we talk about training and induction in safeguarding, it's not a one-off thing. It's constant engagement with people. The other point I wanted to say in support of what Joe said about the rarity. Safeguarding is a form of gender-based violence. These are really stigmatizing, sensitive issues, and it's not easy for somebody to come forward and say, this happened to me. Because of the stigma, what is going to happen to you if you take it forward? Sometimes it's your family, you could lose your marriage. And even for the person reporting on behalf of the other, in tight-knit conservative communities, you face a lot of backlash because communities tend to come in on themselves and come up with traditional methods of solving a problem that are usually not up to the legal standards of, formal legal standards of the country where we are working. So building trust among people, ensuring people understand the importance of confidentiality. People understand that safeguarding is about all of us. It is up to all of us to make the system work by making it confidential. It's not something we discuss at tea time. There's a reporting mechanism. The other thing on the other side, it doesn't mean that every report leads to somebody being fired. Sometimes anonymous reports help the safeguarding teams to understand where the gaps are, and so they're able to work with management to put in place systems that's going to close those gaps. I just want to give one example. Sorry, I tend to talk a lot, but one example, I'm going to use 2 country names, but it doesn't mean that that actual case that came to Oxfam was from those 2 countries. I just want to give an example. So a Canadian country director is working in Ethiopia, and every morning at 6, especially Thursday and Friday, there's a cleaner who either comes with him in the car or comes at the same time. And they lock themselves in his office from 6 to 7. Now, the guards have been trained, the other cleaners have been trained, and other staff who come to the office early have been trained. So they anonymously report that the country director seems to be having an affair with one of the cleaners in Ethiopia. He's Canadian. It wasn't a Canadian and it wasn't in Ethiopia. I'm just trying to protect, yeah? So the report goes through. During investigation, it turns out Mr. Canada is married to an Ethiopian. The lady who comes is the auntie to his wife. And the reason why she comes once in a while at 6, she's communicating with her niece who's sending her money, and they're discussing projects in Ethiopia. So you see, but we are not going to blame the guard or the cleaners or others for reporting. So it comes out that this is the situation. It's actually not a case of the CD abusing a local person. And the lady who's working has been working for Oxfam in Ethiopia, not Ethiopia, but Oxfam in Ethiopia for 15 years. And the Canadian is 2 years old. He had nothing to do with hiring her. He married his wife long before he knew he would work as a country director in Ethiopia. So these are just examples. So what do we do what does that teach us? What does that kind of scenario teach us? What policies do we put in place to ensure that, what were the gaps? So what sort of advice do you think would give this country director and maybe the lady about how they're engaging so that it doesn't appear, yeah? So just to give you an example, yeah, thank you. I hope we are trying to, sometimes there's no right answer, but we're just trying to give you all perspectives to see that what we say about survivor-centered, the policies in place and the systems within the policy are there to protect, and how it's important for people to understand from that perspective and how they get to understand that. Thank you.
Thanks, Edla. Is there anything that either Debbie or Milanoy want to add to that, just to address the SG's questions and concerns before we wrap up?
Just very quickly, just a practical point. I think part of those communications means describing the limitations of anonymous reporting. And as Joe said, having a screening tool that really makes it clear what gets through towards investigation and what maybe doesn't make it through. So I think fully echo my colleagues' comments about that, but there are limits to anonymous reporting. It shouldn't necessarily always lead to a full-scale investigation, and so I think some of it's about tweaking some of that process bit. And I guess the other point I'd like to make is that sometimes it does, and Edla said this, but sometimes it does take years for somebody to come forward, and it's very painful for some people to come forward to report these issues, and that can't be underestimated. So I think, you know, it's critical to have those anonymous reporting mechanisms, but to also recognize that they do feel like they have a lot to lose. A lot of the cases we've dealt with have been of people who feel like their careers will be impacted if they say anything, and that's kept them from reporting for a very long time. So it's a balance, and it's looking at all of these factors together.
Any more questions? I can see more hands in the room. The gentleman, right?
Hello, this is Roland Hassel from the German Red Cross, Corruption Prevention and Response Manager. And I actually wanted to pick up the SG's point just a little bit before he leaves, because I think it's important to discuss that topic. I absolutely agree with Joanne, and the statistics agree with Joanne, that the false reporting, the malicious reporting is rare. Statistics show probably in different countries between 5 to 10%. And that's why we do need to take all reports very, very seriously. However, I also feel that the concern of the SG is valid, because it's not everyone. And the issue that we have is that if we ignore it, then this is dangerous, because this can become worse, and this number can increase. It can be utilized as a weapon. So we do need to take this concern really, really serious. And in investigations and investigation planning that I have seen, and investigation reports that I have reviewed, I noticed very, very often certain confirmation bias. And while I'm absolutely supporting a survivor-centered approach, confirmation bias is the first thing that you learn as an investigator that leads to most wrongful conclusions also. And what I have seen, for example, is not that people did not consider the risks for the SOC, so the subject of complaint, or the alleged person, that these risks that the SG mentioned for a career, for example, were not appropriately considered in risk assessment. So I would only say that this also needs to be considered and taken to be very, very seriously, because a professional investigation is always neutral and avoids confirmation bias. But underlining again, malicious reporting is rather rare, as it has mentioned before.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's just the one. I actually have another question. Like that was just
a question.
Yes, a question, and that is related.
A few minutes, please, so we get to give a chance to the rest of the colleagues.
Yes, just make it quick. The other question is related to what Elda mentioned about the reporting of one case, and then was actually 15 cases, because this is also a concern that I have a lot, that certain reports, like many of our projects are interagency projects. Many of the cases are actually linked to several projects and several agencies, and that leads to potentially a lot of reporting, while agencies often are not well coordinated and connected. And this has a lot of risks as well, like double burden on the survivors, like also the duplication of conducting investigations that are very resource intense, and also in the end also confidentiality risks. However, on the other side, confidentiality and coordination and transparency are also kind of adversaries, and I would be very interested to hear from the panel what they would suggest, how to coordinate that better while at the same time maintain confidentiality. that is needed for the survivors.
Thank you very much. We'll take a couple of more questions. There was a question around here. Go ahead. Mwanaisha, go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Wanaheri from Kenya Red Cross. So my dilemma is around some 3 words that were mentioned. We talked about mandatory reporting. We talked about, and I know SG said maybe we need to find a different word for survivor-centered and everybody's responsibility. So when I'm trying to balance in my role, receiving maybe a survivor will come to me and tell me 1, 2, 3 things. So I have a responsibility to report, but I have to, if they're not ready to report, I have to keep this burden inside of me, but then I still have a mandatory responsibility. So especially when I'm in a role, a safeguarding role, you know, you could have told a friend, and then it's fine because maybe you are speaking as friends. But Charlene and I, who are in safeguarding roles, maybe I'm sure some of us in the room have the same dilemma of these 3 things. What guidance perhaps would you like to share with us on that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's a hand right here, in front here. Here.
Thank you very much. If you can allow me to weigh in on the discussion, and a lot has been said, and of course it's not always a clear answer, like black and white. We have to understand the nuances that come with these safeguarding issues, and when you deal with them. What I can add to it is the importance of capacity building, the personnel who deal with investigation, so that they can understand that this is also a matter of justice. And justice is definitely a philosophical question sometimes, and that's why you always find that the symbol for justice, you're weighing several things, and therefore the importance of the investigation team and the decision makers to remain impartial. So when they get a report, the assumption or the presumption of innocence needs to be there as they continue with the investigation, and that plays a role in also protecting against malicious reports that may be had. And these are just rules of natural justice, and we know that a person who has been accused will have to have a right to be heard, and they would, I think, also just explaining to them, once a report has been made against them, that they will be given an opportunity to be heard on their issue, ensuring there is no bias in the process, so that there is no decision maker who, in the matter, who's also being, if the accused person is one of the decision makers, they should not be included there. So to try and eliminate that bias. And also to remember that under the rules of natural justice, we have a duty to give reasons for whatever decision is made eventually. And I think if we have that in mind, we can have justice in the process of carrying out this investigation, because justice is not just in the outcome, it is in the process of investigation and how you deal with the people who have been accused of any safeguarding issues. And I think that would also minimize the issue of the malicious reporting as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Right at the back, and we also have our OAI colleague sitting at the back, so if there are any questions, I will hand them over to you on that as well. Right at the back, then we go back to the panelists for answers.
Thank you. 2 quick questions. First one about the sensitivity and the culture aspect. When do awareness raising sessions for the community? Usually I come across those barriers that, or excuses that we don't want to do this because we cannot discuss sexual violence, or it's very sensitive. So if you can provide some best practices from different contexts where you considered sensitivity in awareness raising sessions. The second one is about the using the local laws. So sometimes people say that we don't have this policy or this document because we count on the legal framework. It provides already some sanctions or some guidelines how to handle a situation, and we rely on that. So what would you also respond to this, relying on local laws instead of creating your own policies and documentation related to safeguarding? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know who'd like to handle the question on coordination that was mentioned, how best we coordinate, but I think that was mentioned in terms of our responses on reporting. But there's also the question on mandatory reporting as well. What happens if I've seen something and I do have a responsibility to report? Who would like to handle that?
I can take. Yeah, so you're saying that it's survivor-centered, they don't want to report, but they've reported to you. So as a safeguarding practitioner, we have a safeguarding system at the local level, maybe country, maybe region, support from HQ. So there's a system in place. So what I would do as a safeguarding person, I would give all the information because my team understands confidentiality. I'll say, this person has come to me and they've said this, I'd fill the form, but they don't want to come forward, they don't want to participate in an investigation, but they want to report. That is great for me as a safeguarding person because it means we are going to see, analyze, and maybe put things in place to make sure that it doesn't happen again. But it's also really key, Stella was talking about the referral pathway for all staff, because we see safeguarding is for all staff, for all of us to know the GBV referral pathway. As we said, safeguarding, PSCA, they are forms of gender-based violence. So the GBV referral pathway, there's the health component where you need to have clinical management of rape and the PEP kits. So the hospitals in that referral pathway must have those two. For your staff, maybe your medical cover, you make sure that they have access to those through whatever medical cover. But for everybody else, because you can't put aside funding for everyone, so that means liaison with the GBV sector to make sure that that mapping, which is usually done with government and UN and other actors, has already been done, so you don't have to put in extra funding for that, but you can also access that. Then there's the counseling facility for that person. So they would, because of the stigma and the mental and psychosocial issues, they need to have access to that. They need to know that there's a safe house, that there's a police station called with a gender desk, or where people are trained, that there's a court system with magistrates that are trained. So all of us need to know the GBV referral pathway. So if somebody comes to me like that, I report everything through the system. It's good for the system to know, but then we then make sure the person gets support for their life, for their person, and then for us to also be able to put systems in place. And remember, this goes into files, so that in future, if there's another report, sometimes somebody has so many hits, there are so many people reporting this person, they actually have an issue, but they don't want to come forward. Then that's a different, it's important for an organization to know that, and then to sort of come to take a decision about what that looks like.
But I think it'll also be good to remember to point out, for example, what if it's, you've seen something in the field, for example, and it involves a child? I think that will be good to include that into the conversation as well.
Yeah, so you need to know the reporting mechanisms for which agencies work with children. How do you accompany a child? Who's available to support you? Because for children, it's a bit sensitive. Is there a Save the Children office, or a local government office, children's department, or a local NGO that's dealing with children that you can go to, and then you can support, refer that and help to support.
Yeah, with children, sometimes, even if there are no local entities working with children, if you know the referral pathway or the map list of service providers, it could just take a telephone call, and they may be able to actually give you guidance on what to do. First and foremost, the child might have come to you because of trust, right? They trust you, and they believe that when they come to you, you will listen to them, and you will be able to assist them in their situation. So it is not good to just, not be able to support them. So it's encouraged that you should have those lists. You should really know the service providers. locally and also in the country in order to be able to address that. The issue of consent, as Edla mentioned, it's important to track because also it helps you to understand how many reported allegations are there, even if the survivor is not willing to participate in investigations and so on. Importantly, of course, telling them the existence of the support systems which they may partake of. Sometimes they are uncomfortable to have the issue formally reported because of the power dynamics involving the perpetrator. If you have rapport with them and they have been able to disclose to you the reason why they feel that way, perhaps you'll be able to advise them. Because also reporting is prevention, that's what we said, right? So it's not only helping that survivor, it's also helping with addressing a potential larger problem. So if they understand the motivation behind or the importance of reporting, sometimes, and you've given them confidence, they will actually be able to tell you that, okay, in this case, I'm okay, you know. But importantly is not to just keep quiet just because the survivor is uncomfortable to participate in the investigations and so on. Sometimes they're also influenced by family or maybe by that powerful perpetrator and so on. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think let's also respond to the question.
There's another question
on
of
sensitivity and local laws.
Melanoy, can I just point out, I'm so sorry, we're running more than 20 minutes behind.
Okay, so the question I wanted to...
Okay. I'm just a bit aware at the moment, the session that was supposed to follow us about 20 minutes ago. So I just wonder whether or not we can be granted maybe 5 more minutes to answer and then pull it together. I think I'm just very aware. I know we could talk all day because we're all very committed to this area, but and I will just flag, I'm very happy to pick up the question on local laws later if anybody wants to address that bilaterally. Thanks.
We've been told we are closing at 11:30.
So I just quite quickly wanted to respond to the issue of the local context where someone is saying, you know, they go for awareness and the people are uncomfortable to discuss sexuality or so. In the Syria context, what we've done is to also share awareness materials through dignity kits, because the dignity kits are going to individuals. So we have actually packaged materials that have been tested and proved to be communicative and can address their concerns and so on. So we were able to package and put the information in dignity kits. Some of them also went into food baskets and so on. But that is typically in humanitarian context. Now in development context, it's important to bring such questions in the, you know, in the common platform to discuss and see what could be culturally appropriate. You may use gatekeepers, people they trust in their communities, to actually provide such awareness. That means you have to first capacitate those local leaders or the systems they trust. It could be faith-based organizations and so on who can actually meet them because they are not suspecting. The husbands or the people in the community don't suspect such people. So you may have to invest in them in order to actually relay that information instead of you who is seen as a foreigner because you've come from Nairobi, you've come from, it's good to use the systems, the mechanisms available to be able to relay the information to them.
Yeah, one other aspect is when you're an agency, you're usually registered. So you are recognized legally. And then you have administrative law. So there's administrative law regime, and therefore your policies that you have within your organization should have been part of what has been reviewed by that government before they register you. So it's legitimate for you as an organization to request your staff, your partners, and anybody else you're working with to sign the code of conduct, to sign that they've looked at the PSEA policy, to sign the self-declaration form and conflict of interest form. It's your right, it's your legal right to do that. So somebody who's already signed that and accepted the contract cannot again say it's my culture, you're going against my culture, because you don't have to work there. If you feel like it's not for you, then you don't. That's how we deal with our staff. In the community, it's what Stella is talking about. So that's how I would deal with that.
How about you, Debbie?
I was just going to quickly address Roland's question about the coordination. around how if there's multiple partners dealing with an investigation. And just, I think one of the things, hopefully our localization efforts will support this so that we're all working together as more of one entity in each location, and that we understand what our partners are doing, that each partner understands what we're doing. But I think one thing that I don't think we've prioritized is understanding each national society's reporting mechanisms. And so if we've got multiple partners in one location, do we each know how to report, make a safeguarding report to those other partners, so that we can have those conversations as safeguarding professionals directly? Because sometimes we might get a report that we can very quickly say, well, this is not related to us, we'll leave it somewhere else. So until we can get some of those coordination mechanisms firmly in place, I think there are maybe some of the basic communication things about who is the main responder for that national society, so that we can quickly make some decisions about how we're going to coordinate an investigation if it needs to happen. I know it's not a permanent solution, but it's a step.
Thank you very much. We have a bit more time, so we can take the next round of questions. I saw there's a question online. Someone mentioned, if you can put it up again, the online question. There was a question online talking about the code of conduct, and they were saying they did not understand. So I didn't quite catch what you said about the code of conduct. Can you please repeat which principles should be mentioned in the code of conduct? We are currently working on updating them. I want to make sure we get that right. By Bonica Swigon.
The code of conduct is broad. It's a broad integrity document. So it's everything else, but for the safeguarding component to be included, it's the ISC core principles, interagency standing committee principles on PSCA. If you just Google interagency standing committee, 6 interagency standing committee principle on PSCA, it will just come up. There's 6 of them, and they've been reviewed. They've changed a bit from 2002.
Joe mentioned about them, the 6 core principles of PSCA, actually. Yeah.
We can put them as part of the resources to be shared as well online, if that works. Over to the next round of questions. Yeah. No,
Merci. Ange de la Croix-Rouge RDC.
1 minute to.
Bien. Pour renforcer une culture de protection et de redevabilité PCA, c'est efficace. Il est essentiel d'avoir des leaders qui comprennent les vulnérabilités de manière nuancée. De quelle manière, c'est une question que je pose aux panélistes, concrète, les leaderships féminins, que ce soit au niveau opérationnel et au niveau de la gouvernance des sociétés nationales, devront directement mobiliser et soutenir pour auditer, concevoir et renforcer les dispositifs de prévention des abus, et en faisant de leadership une ligne de défense contre les exploitations et abus sexuels. Deuxième, quelles sont les meilleures pratiques qui peuvent garantir la protection et la confidentialité, et aussi le soutien psychosocial, non seulement légal bien sûr, des victimes ou des survivants d'abus sexuels ou des exploitations sexuelles, en particulier dans les contextes difficiles où la stigmatisation est une culture et cette culture est élevée. La dernière question, comment est-ce que nous pouvons passer d'une approche de signalement des cas de PCA à une stratégie opérationnelle de prévention à travers la conception de nos programmes, en intégrant par exemple des mécanismes de redevabilité directs, comme le feedback, et gérés par les communautés elles-mêmes. Merci.
We had some more hands in the front. Maybe you can take 2 questions from the back and come to the front as well. 2 more questions.
Okay, thank you. My name is Julia Orai, I proceed. I have a question on the cultural dynamics. Considering that reporting behaviors are deeply influenced by cultural norms and attitudes towards authority, how can organizations interpret differences in safeguarding reporting, between the regions, seeing that genuine behavior change, takes time, and building trust in those systems, how can we do this? That's my question. Thank you.
At the front, there were some questions at the front as well. Go ahead, Vali.
Sure, thank you. I would like to thank you ladies for bringing the conversation around reporting, responding, and coordination. So I want to weigh in on the question that you posed, Milanoy, at the beginning, that why are people so afraid of safeguarding? So I think it's a reflection of the culture that we come from, where people are afraid of giving feedback, and also people being generally averse to feedback. So what is it? It's the responsibility of the leaders, I think, that has been emphasized on, to make sure that the safeguarding is placed on the agenda all the time, every time, and also that it is everyone's responsibility. Then I also want to urge my safeguarding colleagues in the room that safeguarding is also about providing a safe space for people to be able to approach you, to give in their concerns. You're not a moral police when you're a safeguarding focal point, but it's also being an approachable kind of person where people are free to be able to give in their concerns regarding sexual exploitation, abuse, and harassment. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been interesting to listen to this. So my background is finance, and what I've noticed is if something is not budgeted for, it doesn't happen. That's what happens usually in the Red Cross movement. So what I've noticed is we've moved a lot towards project budgeting. So for example, the PNSs will come with a specific project that they want to fund. And you find that most of these issues related to PGI or safeguarding focal points, they are not included in these budgets. And whenever maybe you try to include them, we usually say, no, this is not part of what the donor wants and stuff like that. So, and you were actually highlighting that maybe 34 national societies in Africa already have the safeguarding policy. So my question to you is what sort of advice would you give to the national societies? How can they operationalize the safeguarding when there are resource constraints that we know of? I think a lot of national societies don't have the focal points, not because they don't want to, but because of the limitations in terms of resources. And you find that most of our staff are project-based. So if Finnish Red Cross, for example, is funding a safeguarding focal point, when our project ends, then that's the end, and then we don't have that knowledge transfer even within the Red Cross network. So what advice would you give to the national societies that are here?
Thank you for that question. So we have questions around culture. So we should really answer about culture, and also around stigma. And the question from our colleague from DRC talking about confidentiality, especially in very difficult contexts. I can imagine looking at multiple crises and things like that. So maybe we can start with the first question on confidentiality, even in difficult contexts and cultural contexts as well.
It's a very difficult question because there are two ways of looking at it. So there was a question we answered where Stella was talking about how to implement safeguarding issues in the community. So when you're going in, you need to do an assessment like any other project. And one of the key things is to identify trusted allies. So if you don't have a PSCA network, you don't have a GBV, there are GBV actors that you can start engaging with when you're doing your assessment, because safeguarding is part of, the PSCA is part of that. So they already will have some information and knowledge. It's about liaising with the local organizations who have on the ground experience and knowledge of who the trusted people are and how they are working on that. The information cannot come from outside. So even I am Kenyan, so even if I go into a community in Kenya, it doesn't mean I know just because I'm Kenyan. Each community is very unique. So working with local actors who are like-minded, like CBOs, national organizations, government sometimes, you know, the social welfare department, the Ministry of Gender person who's stationed there, the UN reports, the World Bank report. I mean, you have to do an assessment to be able to determine who is on the ground to help you understand the context. And we've been talking about community engagement, community-based feedback mechanisms. You have to consult with the community. Many years ago, there was a big governance program. The assumption in Nairobi was that radio, because KBC covers 80%, I don't know how much it covers now of the country, that radio is a good way of sharing messages on governance. But when they did the evaluation, they discovered that it's 80% coverage, but most women do not have access to a radio. Because in the morning when my husband wakes up, he puts the radio on his bike and he goes to the town center with it. And in the evening when the men are sitting around the fireplace with the radio, the women are not and the girls are not there. So the evaluation discovered that. But if you look at the statistics, you'll think that there's that outreach. So it's really, really important to do evaluations, assessments, to find out who your allies are. It doesn't mean that Oxfam and IFRC have the best knowledge. We just have systems, but it has to work within what is already there. And communities already have solutions, and communities are already dealing with gender-based violence. So we need to work closely with the community to see how that system, you know, to support them also and to help them to see through that. That's what I can say when it comes to confidentiality.
Thank you very much. We've run out of time. So kindly allow me to respond to the last question. Are we okay with culture and stigma? Is that sufficient? We will continue the conversation. There was a question about budget policies, which I think is very critical. We do have a lot of policies, but the biggest gap we have, I can speak on behalf of the FRC network, is really practically actualizing the policies, ensuring that we have action plans in place. And this boils down to leadership. I know we have SGs in the room, presidents. We show our commitment by what we prioritize. One of the things we recommend is ensuring that as you do your own planning, your strategy, the National Society strategy should reflect your priorities. If PGI or safeguarding is not part of your strategy, it's not part of your yearly budget, it's not part of your yearly planning as well, in terms of budgeting and organizational structure, then how are we showing it is a priority? How do we go to a donor to fundraise if it's not included in our strategy, our planning, our organizational structure? So those are the key things we look at as well. And that is why we encourage, if you do your own assessments, look at an internal assessment to see where are you at. Where are the gaps in terms of safeguarding so that you start working on them. And the biggest gap where we never see budget is because of those three things. It's never part of your strategy, so it's not your priority. There's no, for example, a yearly plan included as part of that as well. At the same time, we do have opportunities, and we have NSD colleagues in the room, because this is part of national society development. You know, if you don't have strengthened systems in safeguarding, then you cannot say that your national society development is strengthened as well. So I think also work closely with the NSD colleagues. I'm putting them on the spot as well. But also looking at other funding mechanisms. For example, the capacity building fund. We've really done a lot of advocacy, and now the IFRC capacity building fund does include funding where you can have increased funding if you're looking at PGI or safeguarding. We have had National Society who've actually applied for the capacity building fund, and I can see my colleague lifting it up over there, where you actually apply for funding and you'll actually get funding specifically to strengthen your safeguarding mechanisms as well. But I think to be able to sustain the safeguarding positions in your national society, please put it in your organogram. As you fundraise for all the other positions, let that be a priority position that you're fundraising for. That it's not like a project, we are only funding it for 6 months because we don't have money. You fundraise for what you prioritize as well. And I think there's a lot of coordination for example, for the networks for PGI safeguarding that discuss all these issues as well to try to strengthen fundraising as well. Thank you so much. Hand over to Joanne if she has final thoughts before we go to Aisha. Thanks.
My final thoughts really are just a grateful thanks to be honest, actually, to the great panelists and to some of the very important and difficult questions that have been posed by everybody. And just also huge thanks to the Kenya Red Cross and indeed to their SG for asking difficult questions whilst also flagging the importance of the approach, the victim-centred approach, whilst recognising that there are difficulties inevitably. I would just urge, though, just for the takeaway with all of this, what Milanoy has just said is really important. We've got a fabulous frameworks in place. We've got some great staff. We've got some great focal points, but as I always say to the senior management colleagues at IFRC, magical thinking and safeguarding doesn't work, unfortunately. It's that old thing, if you fail to plan, then you have to plan to fail, so we need funding, we need recognition. The point that was made earlier, I thought was very, very valid about the knowledge transfer. A lot of this stuff doesn't necessarily have to cost significant money. What it does require, though, is a shift in culture, shift in embedding safeguarding across all of our systems, all of our mechanisms, and indeed, particularly at a governance level and at leadership. So I'll just say a huge thanks again to everybody in the room, and particularly to our panelists and indeed to Milanoy for facilitating so brilliantly. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks, Debbie. Thanks, Stella and Edla, Milanoy, and Joe for doing a fantastic job. I think now I'm convinced the other career that is also misunderstood is safeguarding and not just audit. Okay, so can I kindly call upon the president of Mauritius Red Cross, Tia Vasen, I hope I pronounced it correctly, to hand over gifts to our beautiful, beautiful panelists. The ladies in the room, the gender imbalanced is safeguarding profession appears to be a gender imbalanced profession. Okay. Men, you can also apply for safeguarding jobs. Thank you. Guy who does the pictures. PR. Oh, you're taking it from behind? We have to hand over the gifts again? Yes, please. All right. Go ahead. Thank you. All right, thank you so much. So I think we'll break for coffee now. I know we've been sitting for quite some time. Apologies, we've slightly gone above, but I think it was important. And today being the last day, we'll let our hair down a bit. So we will break for coffee 15-20 minutes and then come back for the safeguarding pledge and the celebrations at 60. So please don't eat so much because there's some goodies coming. Thank you. Sorry, we forgot the gift for Joe.
Putting our national society first. From the Mali Red Cross, from Kyrgyzstan Red Crescent, from Kiribati Red Cross, from ICRC, from IFRC. We really make this joint commitment. And as you know, we've been really successful having 21 other national societies joining in. So what did we commit to? We commit to 3 things. First, policy, development, and implementation. We commit to training and awareness. And then we commit to reporting channels and survivor-centered approach. Those all were topics that were discussed in the last, in the last panel discussion, so I'm not gonna go into it. I just wanna say that when we receive allegations, it is already late. So we need to take steps ahead. We need to be ahead of the harm that we can cause to communities, to people. The pledge is one way to do it, because it just shows your commitment, that the message that we transfer today is digested, and then that you're ready to take this step forward. So actually what the Safeguarding Pledge is an invitation. It's an invitation to all the leaders of the national societies today, online, to all the integrity professionals, to stand up for integrity, to stand up for accountability, to truly live the do no harm principle. So actually a pledge is just the way to take integrity beyond words. Thank you. If there are questions, or if there are any national societies who got so inspired that want to sign the pledge right away, please come to me after the conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope we are committing to signing the pledge so that then we see the numbers go much higher. So that brings us to the end of the conference. Oh. Sad, huh? Can we continue tomorrow, after next week? Yeah? Only if you sign the pledge. So please, if you really want to continue, a big up to Adriana. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, so that brings us to the end of the conference. Sadly, it was so nice to have you all. Lovely to see the room full and the engagements. I hope we've managed to take away something out of it. When you're coming, we gave you a notebook. So this notebook has some inserts inside, so that then you can keep referring to it, so that then we build on that culture. So about our fundamental principles and how we can adhere to them, there's also an action plan, yeah? Feel free to automate that as well. You've gone through the AI session, so you don't have to write here, just do something automated. That would be nice. Yeah, at the back of the page, we've given a sample of our Kenya Red Cross integrity statement. So again, if it is something that as a national society, something you would want to do, please, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's just a commitment. It is something that we move forward to it. All right? Yeah? So thank you very much for that. We'll come to a close to this. So allow me to just show a small video of the journey of Kenya Red Cross on integrity. And then we start the at 60s celebrations, where we're celebrating Kenya Red Cross turning 60 years, and apparently we're also celebrating the fundamental principles, right? 60th. Oh, yeah. So it's a big celebration, yeah? Both, yeah. So there are goodies lined up for us. Monaheri has lined up some goodies, so please stay with us. So, team, can we have the video playing, please?
Founded in 1965 through an Act of Parliament, the Kenya Red Cross Society has remained at the heart of humanitarian action, saving lives, restoring hope, and empowering communities across Kenya in times of crisis and recovery.
One of the pillars of Red Cross movement is that it has got to be national. And you can only have one Red Cross in any country. So we're going to have British Red Cross branch here. So we had to convert ourselves into Kenyan Red Cross Society.
It was difficult those days, by the way. Difficult because the organization was not really known by our Kenyan people. It was a voluntary organization, and to get people to volunteer their services and their money, it was very, very difficult indeed.
By 1966, it had gained full international recognition. 2 years later, Wangari Maathai joined as a director, helping shape the society's spirit of service and visionary leadership. In 1971, the society launched its first international food aid appeal, marking Kenya's growing voice in global humanitarian response.
We saw literally carcasses of wildlife, domestic animals, littering the landscapes. We saw rivers drying up. If we don't do anything, these things can only accelerate.
I went to the Red Cross in '73 while in high school. And that is my association between me and Red Cross since then. 11 years as a volunteer in Mombasa in a local branch, but the last 32 years or 30 plus years as a paid staff, both locally here and internationally. I remember way back in '78 in Mombasa as a volunteer, when we had refugees coming all the way from Vietnam, who then were called the boat people, who were coming as far as this part of the world to look for sanctuary. And where the Red Cross went to assist them before they were relocated to some in France, some in Canada, as asylum seekers, and they were taken to those countries.
I joined Red Cross in 1974 in primary school, in Nyamashaki Primary School. We were contributing 20 shillings. We buy egg and knowledge, whereby we go and distribute, we go and feed the children in the wards. And then later on, we were going also for community service, like cleanups. And then also during the time of the flag days, Red Cross flag days, having those teams, we go and collect money from the well-wishers.
The 1980s brought recurring droughts and famine. The Red Cross stepped forward, leading life-saving food distributions, strengthening public health systems, and partnering with others to develop Kenya's first national disaster plan.
This is a plan that informs all our responses, all our strategic placements. We have cyclic disasters, like we know there will always be either a flood or a drought situation in the country, and there are those which are not cyclic in nature, either protest or road traffic accidents. And all these, there are plans behind them, and these scenarios tell us whether it's a mid-level, it's a normal scenario, because accidents will always happen. This is normal. And then there are scenarios now, they become bigger, they are mid-size or they are national scale scenarios. So we build on those scenarios and plan behind those scenarios.
If we get into a building collapse, the first thing we need is to save life. But what am I looking at after that? I'm looking at safety and security. I'll need to cordon the area, protect the wananchi. I'll need to mobilize excavators. I'll need to mobilize body bags. I'll need to mobilize enough ambulances. So as you deploy one, because it's going to be saving lives for the next 30 minutes, and then after 1 hour, I need an ambulance. After this, I need that. So it's a sequence of operation, and it requires you to be very well coordinated.
In 1991, the society provided aid to refugees fleeing the Somali civil war. A year later, it was on the front lines of relief during the post-election ethnic violence that shook parts of the country.
In 1992, we had the post-election. I was working at the reception. I was a telephone operator by then. I received so many calls from Nakuru branch. They were calling to get support from the headquarters. Our former branch coordinator called and wanted to speak to the Secretary General. They wanted support because they were overwhelmed. And I remember the Secretary General calling an urgent meeting to discuss, and then staff were dispatched and gathered the volunteers from the branch, and they started responding to the displaced community.
Kenya Red Cross was very instrumental even in the reconstruction phase of that violence. It built quite a number of houses for those who were affected. We have water sources that were also contaminated, and they were decontaminated by the society.
On the 7th of August 1998, a bomb exploded at the US Embassy in Nairobi. In the immediate aftermath, Kenya Red Cross volunteers helped remove more than 100 bodies from the rubble and provided first responder support for victims. In 2001, Abbas Gulay assumed leadership as Secretary General, ushering in an era of growth and innovation. The society decentralized its operations, established regional branches, and expanded emergency preparedness. Through the Turbi massacre, the 2007-2008 post-election violence, and many other national crises, the Red Cross stood firm, bringing relief, dignity, and hope to affected families.
Red Cross, as I said, is a national organization. We want to be the most independent, most efficient, effective responders to disasters, to emergencies.
2007 post-election violence that went into 2008, the bigger part of the operations. We had a massive camp at the Eldoret showground, over 20,000 people in that IDP camp, which I planned and helped setting it up. Again, there was further displacement of the people down to Naivasha, Nakuru, at the Afra's showground. We also had camps in Molo and in Naivasha we had Kedong and the stadium camps, which we were all managing them, both setup and camp management of this side. The day we had the Sachangwan fire, I remember we had to drive through the night to just reach the place, and with over 100 bodies that were really no bodies.
Let's not forget the desert locusts as well, because that also had a big impact, especially where there was crop production. But also COVID-19, people have lost jobs, there are not enough farm hands, and there's not enough money for people even to buy food, even if it is there in the market. So all this together, of course, just make the situation quite desperate.
This period also saw the birth of sustainable ventures such as the Kenya Red Cross Training Institute, Boma Hotels, Boma International Hospitality College, E+ ambulance services, and Switch Media, ensuring long-term resilience for humanitarian work.
Why get into business as Red Cross?
No, we got into business simply to sustain ourselves so that we can respond to disasters when they happen anywhere. That is why tulianzisha kampuni ya ambulance. E+ ni kampuni, an ambulance company that was set up and today is the largest private ambulance company on the continent of Africa.
E+, I can say, is an idea that came at the right time when the country needed it, because from the inception of E+ to date, emergency medical service has evolved in this country.
One of the objects of the society is to train disaster responders, humanitarian workers, and pre-hospital care workers. So the Institute bridges the gap for the society in terms of training its personnel to continually respond to the humanitarian disasters, but also train health workers outside the hospital and inside the hospital. These are the pre-hospital care workers.
The 2010s defined a new generation of impact. The society played a key role in managing refugee operations in Dadaab, organizing national blood drives, and leading major emergency responses, including the Westgate Mall and Garissa University terror attacks. In each tragedy, Kenya Red Cross volunteers and staff offered medical aid, psychosocial support, and tracing services for affected families. In January 2019, during the Dusit D2 terror attack, Red Cross teams again led evacuation, rescue, and counseling efforts.
We have managed as an organization to have teams on ground through at least ensuring that the teams have the necessary skills and equipment to pre-position in the high-risk areas. And through our emergency operations center, we have managed to identify the early warnings and ensure that we put our teams on standby, ready for quick activation. And this has helped very much because we have managed to reduce the response time
where we have boots on ground in a timely manner, especially on the sudden mass casualty incidents which result to large number of injuries like the Garissa University attack and other terror incidents where our teams move in very quickly and they manage to offer the necessary first aid on the ground even before we start now evacuating.
We had the Dusit one as well, which was also a major disaster. We responded as E+ together with the Kenya Red Cross, and we were able to save quite a number of lives from that terrorist attack. And I think the most notable thing from these disasters, it doesn't end with just responding to disasters. You know, there's a post-recovery bit of every disaster that is mostly not paid attention to, the psychosocial support and also the follow-ups. And if you look at the Westgate attack, one of the things that the Kenya Red Cross did was to support some of the survivors of the terror attack to restart their livelihoods again.
We're always first in and last out. So we move first in, we get to understand how it is happening, what is happening, we respond, we provide the basics. Once they stabilize a bit, we now transition them. As we transition them to development activities, the relief moves out so that the resilience team can move them to restore their normalcy.
The Society's use of drones for disaster assessment that same year showcased its growing commitment to innovation in humanitarian response.
We are considering use of drones, especially in delivering some critical medicines. As you are aware, anti-snake venoms are quite critical in some areas in Kenya, like Baringo. So we are in the process of using the drones to ensure that critical commodities are delivered on time for purposes of saving lives, as well as also blood-related commodities like blood bags, which are required at designated places. We are in the process of using the drones just to ensure that those critical commodities are delivered in a timely manner. We work also with multi-agency to provide airlift services where need be, especially where the villages or the locations are marooned and there is no access, total access to the area.
And I'm really extremely proud of our volunteers and our staff who take risks every day out there, attending to people who are injured in protest. I'm proud of the work of our ambulance company, E+, that are the trailblazers in responding to emergencies, including emergencies in difficult situations in civil unrest.
Recent years have tested Kenya's resilience like never before. From the devastating El Nino floods of 2023 to the Mai Mahiu flash floods and Embakasi gas explosion of 2024, the Red Cross has been on the front lines, rescuing survivors, providing emergency care, shelter, and family tracing support.
We are represented in all the 47 counties. We are a national resource for the country on behalf of government. Our establishment is such that we support government who has the direct responsibility over all disasters.
In 2024 and 2025, amid youth-led protests and moments of national tension, Kenya Red Cross continued to provide neutral humanitarian assistance, dispatching ambulances, offering first aid, and ensuring medical help reached those in need.
We have embarked on putting 12 operational hubs in 12 critical areas of this country to do two things: to become the heart and soul of our emergency response in pre-positioning, in training, and in surveillance. That's the first thing. For us to also discharge our mandate, the movement, to be the basis for critical prepositioning of items for the movement in this region. So the 12 hubs have a domestic profile, but in the choice of location, there is also a regional profile. We are proposing to put a hub in Moyale to support not just Kenya, but also the lower Ethiopia. We are proposing to have a hub in Lodwar to support Sudan, Uganda, and that entire region. We are proposing to put a hub in Kisumu to support the response in Busia, the entire of West Kenya, but also in Uganda. We are proposing to put a hub in Lamu to help us in supporting response, including to Somalia, where there has been a large influx of individuals in this year. We also have other hubs in Tana River, in Samburu, and so on. The design is such that this society should not lose time by moving goods for response, by moving individuals and teams for emergency response from places that are very far from where the risk is.
From a modest volunteer movement to a national institution, the Kenya Red Cross Society has spent 6 decades proving that humanity, unity, and compassion can overcome any challenge. Its mission extends far beyond disaster response. It's about reconnecting families separated by crisis, building healthier communities through clean water and sanitation, training first responders, empowering young leaders, and helping families rebuild their lives with dignity.
We didn't just invest in our light vehicles, we invested also in our heavy vehicles. We've grown our trucks capacity in 2024 from 3 to 12. These vehicles are available for regional deployment. I have 6 6x6 trucks that can operate up in water up to the depth of 2.7 meters. Among the very few vehicles that we have in the country now. Those ugly vehicles there will be the future of the Kenya Red Cross. People were laughing at us when we said we will preposition 3 boats in Nairobi during the last floods. And it is those 3 boats that saved people's lives.
It's humbling to be in a space where people who you've never interacted with can just pick up their call and call you for help, and you reach out and go assist. And after that, you part with no exchanging numbers. You just needed to save one more life. And I mean, in rescue and in everything we do, he that saved one life, it's as though you saved the entire world.
It is not just an organization. It is a lifeline. It is a promise to be always there.
Proud organization to work for. So allow me to now hand over to the Secretary General, Dr. Ahmed Idris. We've seen him in the video, looking good on the video as well, but now in person as well, to just close for us. Thank you.
You know, the beauty of celebrating 60 years as the Secretary General is I get to communicate 60 years of success and built on the shoulders of great men and women. How many of you knew that a former Secretary General of the Kenya Red Cross was a Nobel Prize winner, Nobel Peace Prize winner? How many of you knew that? And there is the history of the institution. Before I invite the chairman to speak, I just wanted to share one point from the heart. The context of the work that we do is one in which saying that we will do the right thing is not a matter that you have an option for. The work itself is right. You know, saving lives is an objective that ought to be right for every community. But saving lives the right way, doing the right thing, the right processes, and sustaining it through generations is one of the most difficult things to do. And therefore, the choice of hosting the Integrity Conference in a year that we are celebrating 60 years of service was meant to be a reminder that what we do today, what is expected of us today, will not just be important for the work we are doing today, 60 years from now, there are people who will be looking back. You know, the same way we look at the late Rachel Mzera, who served as the first Secretary General, and we say she did the right thing. 60 years from today, there will be people who will be judging you. Not just for the Kenya Red Cross, you who is in Burkina Faso or in the British Red Cross or the American Red Cross. The thing with history is when it is written, the best thing to do is not to be in the chapter people are sad about. And that is what the concept of integrity is. Do not write a chapter in the history books about wrong things. Do your best to do the right thing. And for me, it is an honor to really that you could be part of this gathering and you could join us in celebrating 60 years of service. And more particularly, when you see the work that the volunteers are doing, the risk that they take out there, that ought to be a great reminder to us, especially those of us who are paid to do this job, that there are people out there who are doing the right thing for free. That ought to be what gives us the reminder every day that this picture is bigger than us. It is bigger than you and I. Humanity, as a conviction, requires every one of us to invest their best in it. And therefore, you know, I feel really, really honored that we are celebrating today. We are celebrating yesterday, but more importantly, we want to celebrate tomorrow. So I really, you know, wish the Kenya Red Cross, as the Secretary General celebrating the 60th anniversary, another 60 years to be proud of. So this is where I do also the right thing of inviting my boss to join us and also invite a few people to help us in cutting this beautiful cake. What's the flavor for the cake? Butterscotch, yes. It has eggs, right? Yeah, so they were not sensitive to those of us who don't eat eggs. So, Governor, karibu.
I think mine, Secretary General has finished it. But as I stand today here, as we celebrate this 60th anniversary for Kenya Red Cross, I am a proud man, not only for myself, but for the volunteers who have worked tirelessly, for the members who have worked tirelessly. I am today the 8th governor of Kenya Red Cross. Before me, there were 7 other governors who served several and various terms. Some served 1 term, some served more than 1 term. But in totality, what we are doing is celebrating the sacrifices made by those leaders, right from our local branches all the way to national level. But also, we can't forget the support that we have received from our partners, from our donors, and from our sister national societies. This has been a journey. And I know for us to move forward as a team, we still need you as Kenya Red Cross. I think one of the greatest moments in my first term as the governor is 2 incidents. The one in Shakahola, where when the government requested Kenya Red Cross to support them, the bodies were really getting decomposed at a very high level. And when Kenya Red Cross came with the mobile mortuary, I think it was a game changer. The other incident was a very sad incident in Londiani. We have had leaders in this country. They've heard about Red Cross, but for the first time, they interacted with Kenya Red Cross. And what they say, especially during memorial service, is for the first time in their life, they realize in this country there are volunteers who really give out their best without expecting a pay. So I think today we are celebrating the efforts of those volunteers. We are celebrating the energy that has been given, especially for those who offer their life, for those who have offered their services free of charge, and expect that at the end of the day, they can go back to their homes. We have young people in our schools, in our universities, who really also volunteer. In totality, I want to say on behalf of the National Executive Board, on behalf of all the leaders in this country, on behalf of the staff, we are honored that today you are part and parcel of this team who are celebrating. Asante sana, and may God bless all of you for the support you have given to us so far. Thank you.
So may I have on stage the presidents who are in the room. President Malagasiwe is the President Uganda Red Cross. Vice President Bolaji. Vice President Bolaji, please join us. I swear that knife will not kill you. It's just for cutting the cake. Mauritius, please. President of Uganda, President of Nigeria, Eswatini, SG, come, SG, John Rabo. Madam SG at the back, please join us. Before I eat the cake, President of Uganda is here. Who's the other SG in the room? The other Secretary Generals. They're just representing you. Don't worry, the cake will come to everyone. Madam Juliana and the two other board members, please come, join, represent your volunteers. I swear we'll be the first one to eat. You do the cutting, I do the eating. We start with that. Thank you.
as we wait for the cake, I just wanted us to start the closing part for the conference. Unfortunately, all good things have to have an end some of the time. The last 3 days, if you look at the range of the topics for discussion, it is a combination of what you have to deal with today, but what you have to think about tomorrow. And it was done by design to help us not answer questions, but to raise more questions around what we should think about and what we should do. If you feel you came here and you are leaving with more questions than the answers you got, we are very successful with the conference. That was the objective. The objective was for us to identify questions that ought to be important to us as individuals, to institutions, and for the movement as a whole. My request is, as you leave today, if you feel there are questions that are not answered, list them down. We want to work towards answering these questions together. Have a plan in which we give each other support as peers, as different national societies, over the next several weeks and months and years, so that at the end of the day, when it comes to integrity, when it comes to ethics, when it comes to protecting the volunteers, the communities we serve, our staff, the movement will be the beacon of what is close to getting it right. That's the objective for the conference. And I want to really thank all of you on behalf of the organizing committee, on behalf of the number of national societies and individuals who put in a bit of time to prepare for this conference. I want to thank you for being active participants. I want to thank you for taking time off busy schedules in your national societies to join us in a discussion on important questions for the movement. I want to extend a special gratitude to the organizing committee. So Aisha and your team, where is your team? Yes. Yeah, so the organizing team from Kenya Red Cross. By the way, as a matter of policy, I rarely say thank you to the staff. Yeah, so, and I tell them that the reason is not because I do not recognize the work that you do, but I do so every month at the end of the month and say thank you to your bank accounts. So the feedback that I received was once in a while they said, my colleagues, pretend you can thank us. So I really want to thank the team of very strong ladies who made this work. You know, not just the team in internal audit, Susan, the DSG Corporate Services, who supported Sarah, the Chief of Staff and Head of Governance, and Joe disappeared in this conference. Yes, so he's back today. You see, he's very strategic. He was away the entire conference, came back for the thank you message. Joe, the Deputy SG Programs, so the organizing committee, thank you. But also our partners who are part of the organizing committee from the British Red Cross, Debbie, thank you for all the effort you put in. Maria, so there's a gentleman who was hiding, Fred. Thank you for representing us as also people who are interested in integrity. Thank you very much. For the PNSS, the Netherlands Red Cross, American Red Cross, Swedish Red Cross, the ICRC, the IFRC, thank you very much for being part of this conference. We want to do this more in various elements, and I think we look forward to developing that plan together. The special group of volunteers who, of course, supported us, volunteers, thank you for making this work. Thank you very much. The team from Switch TV. Switch TV is our team, our internal company that have made their future around hosting events, streaming events and hosting conferences. Thank you for the sense of professionalism. The fact that we had hundreds of people joining online and you've been streaming continuously and giving us that support really means a lot. So thank you very much, Switch TV team. And to the board of the Kenya Red Cross, thank you for, taking this as an important question. As a national society, we said every year we will host 2 global movement events as part of our peer-to-peer learning. And the fact that the board said the Integrity Conference is a critical component, so there are 2 conferences we held, the social impact and entrepreneurship conference for the movement, and now for the integrity. Thank you for taking this as an important subject, but more important, thank you for coming in person to be part of this discussion. For the IFRC colleagues, the board, led by the Vice President Elder Bolaji, Vice President IFRC, board member Julian Kamau, the IFRC team, Pierre, Charles, are now represented by the technical staff. Thank you for partnering with us in hosting this conference. The last comment is this. The Kenya Red Cross does not have a sense of perfection in anything. We are not pushing a message that we are doing well. The message we are pushing is that we are concerned about what we are getting right and not getting right, that we want you to be part of the journey. Asking you to be here with us was not for you to learn from us, it's for us to discuss with you critical questions that bother us, that we think we may not be getting right. So please give us feedback. Give us feedback on what we get right, and give us feedback on what we get wrong. And most importantly, give us feedback on how we can partner with you better, both as PNSs, our sister national societies. With those very many remarks, I want to invite our father and our elder to close the meeting for us. You see, he already knows himself as the only father and elder. Elder Anani Bolaji, Vice President of the IFRC and former President of the Nigeria Red Cross. Karibu.
Thank you. She realized in time that I'm not as tall as the others who have gone before. Dear colleagues and partners, what I'm about to say now was considered for a statement at the beginning. But when I saw the list of those who were making statements at the beginning and highly placed the list was, I said, no, I better dodge and make my statement at the end. The subject of integrity. In humanitarian service generally, integrity means being principled, transparent, and accountable in your decisions and actions. It is about serving with honesty, respect, compassion, and upholding the dignity of those you serve. Humanitarian workers face many challenges. Integrity is very crucial in these situations, ensuring that aid is delivered effectively, efficiently, and with respect to those in need. Integrity means being honest, trustworthy, and doing the right thing even when no one is watching. It's about being true to ourselves, true to our principles, true to our values, and standing up for what we actually believe in. In the IFRC, integrity is the extent to which national societies possess the will and the ability to act in pursuit of their declared statutes, objectives, policies, standards, rules, and guidelines in full accordance with the fundamental principles of the movement. It is clear what integrity is, but we would like to add, knowing is not enough. We should apply what we know. Willing is not enough. We must act on what we are willing to do. What are the building blocks of integrity? Ethics is the reflection that leads to doing the right thing in line with the fundamental principles and values of the IFRC. For IFRC governance, and this should extend to national society leadership, doing the right thing always has the components of 1, thinking the right way, 2, deciding the right course of actions. You can think the right way and still decide the wrong course of action. But what we believe ethics includes is to say you do the right thinking and then you decide the right course of actions. And 3, behaving the right way or taking the right action in the right manner. In this respect, ethical decision-making is the process of evaluating and choosing from alternatives in line with the IFRC ethics, their values, while acting and behaving ethically consists of upholding the highest ethical standards at all times. This is a statement that is contained in the IFRC ethics framework. Drawing from the 7 fundamental principles of the movement, the 6 values of the IFRC, and the above considerations, the IFRC adopted into its code of conduct the ethical values of duty of care, duty of loyalty, integrity, and accountability. We can see, therefore, that integrity is a major plank in our ethics framework. Other aspects of integrity include 1, impartiality, which is providing assistance based on need without bias or discrimination. 2, neutrality, which is not taking sides or promoting a particular agenda. 3, transparency, which is being open and clear about your resources, your decisions, and your actions. Number 4, accountability, which is like taking responsibility for your actions and being answerable to those we serve and those who guide and or fund us. I believe we need to interrogate further why we are always emphasizing upward accountability, except when it comes to national society, and we now refer to CEA, refer to beneficiary implications, and ask the national society to be accountable to the beneficiaries, the communities that benefit from the service. But we do not ask the funding partners to also account to the national society. What was the value of your appeal? What did you raise in our name or in the crisis that's affecting us? And how much have you transmitted to us? What is the percentage? That account we never get. That accountability we never request. But we insist that the national society must be accountable to the communities they serve and even draw the budgets with them. Number 5 is respect. Treating those we serve with dignity and respect. I would like to emphasize that to sustain integrity, accountability and transparency would always and should always coexist, with transparency preceding accountability and thereby making it more seamless. These 2 aspects are crucial in building trust. In our attempts to scale agility, however, we must and should be careful not to downgrade due diligence. How do we buy in to this whole integrity? Sometimes we have said, I quote, "We do not need to change the winning teams," end of quote. However, we want to ask ourselves, even though this point is fantastic, are all the wins equal in value? Are at the same level? We all know that that is not correct. Some wins stand out far better than others, which means whatever the level of your win, there is a higher level of win. And we must aspire to change to get to that level. Secondly, there is currently a craving for innovation. Africa is rapidly becoming a hub for innovation, driven by a large youthful population and the rising tech investments across the continent. Innovations are often locally developed so that it can address specific needs at that local level. Many organizations are prioritizing renovation. We in the movement cannot be left behind. And innovation means change. Thirdly, the imperative for institutionalized integrity has never been more urgent than now. We are navigating a landscape marked by shrinking funding streams and escalating humanitarian needs. Needs that are not only unprecedented in scale, but increasingly complex in nature. In this context, integrity is not optional, it is foundational. It constitutes the pillar upon which trust is built. Trust in our systems, trust in our leadership, trust in our abilities to deliver with improved impact. As an organization, we are being called to innovate. What are we innovating? To design, number one, a new resilient funding model that not only bridges the gap left by reduced donor support, but also amplifies our capacity to respond swiftly and effectively. Two, to design new and better ways of managing available funds, which may include a redistribution and location of our staff so that we can reduce logistic costs and allow more funds to be available to meet the needs of the beneficiaries. It has to be remembered that innovation without integrity is hollow. And it is only through transparent governance, ethical stewardship, and a culture of accountability that we can inspire confidence in our partners, in our communities, and in ourselves. Let us therefore create the change that our organization needs. As we depart from here, let it be turning over in our minds what is the change we are taking back to our national societies. This conference has been fantastic in both its relevance with regards to the content, and it has been also fantastic in the regiment of this conference. We thank the Kenya Red Cross for the planning. It's a good demonstration which I want to hope the next Pan-African conference will copy from. Not overloading a particular conference and thinking that the best opportunity or that is an opportunity of giving everybody a time to say something and everybody goes home, only feeling satisfied that I had an opportunity to talk, but not putting down on record what I learned from the process. We also want to thank all the funding partners for their support. We requested at the beginning that there should be a full recording of whatever transpires here, so that we are not only going to transmit what is like plans of action, we are not only going to transmit papers or whatever we have distributed here to people, but we will transmit what everybody has said, so that in what we have been said that probably has not been important to you may be important to somebody else who has not been here. We have also resolved that we have to plan quickly a more inclusive conference for early 2026 that will have all presidents and all SGs sitting together. Again, let me join the Secretary General of Kenya Red Cross to thank his staff and volunteers who have made our stay comfortable and convenient. Dear colleagues, somebody had asked earlier on, have we learned anything? And we said yes. Let me appeal. Let the lessons learned here not go to waste. Let the notes not be buried on the shelves. I was so impressed that I saw many of us taking notes. I was taking notes too. Please let those notes not be buried on the shelves. Let the emerging ideas not remain hoarded in us only. Let us, as we go back to our national societies, let us reflect on them. Let us regurgitate them. Let us disseminate them. Let us cascade them. Let us make them attractive to all leaders at different levels of our national societies. In Africa, when people travel, when fathers and mothers or seniors travel, as they are coming back, they buy what is called bread for those they are going to meet. It can be any form. I want to plead with all of us. Let the lessons we have learned here be the bread we are taking back to our national societies. Let the change grow. Let the national society innovation become clear. Let integrity reign supreme in our national societies. On this note, it is in the name of the humanitarian system worldwide and our movement that we would like to declare this very mature conference closed. Thank you very much.
Elder Bolaji was giving me a new assignment. So thank you. Lunch will be served. Feel free. Lunch is ordinarily served until 3 o'clock. So if you are not particularly hungry, you can interact with your colleagues and have your lunch later. For the presidents and the secretary generals, we have a small get-together over lunch. My colleague at the back, Susan, you can wave. SGs and presidents, that is Susan. She will lead you to where we shall be having a discussion. For the rest of the colleagues, the lunch is the same. The one the president and the SGs are having is the same one that you will have. Just a separate room, because we want to give them some assignments around the follow-up to this conference. So thank you very much. Enjoy your lunch and the rest of your stay. Aisha?
Just final comments for colleagues going to the National Park. Please coordinate with Joy so that we can support you. The conference photos are already uploaded at the back of your, just scan the QR code and look at the website. We will send an evaluation form for you to kindly give us feedback and be as candid and integrity in commenting and be truthful as much as possible so that then it can help us improve. Yeah, I'm forgetting the last statement, but thank you very much. Thank you. Travel safely for those who are leaving. Thank you.